Chapter 81, Consequences. Tai Lung's POV. I had a serious talk with Shifu right before I came back to Gongmen to protect it from the Allied army. Refer to Chapter 68. I remembered when I first became a general, he said whenever I needed help in my conquest, the Jade Palace was there for me. He and his students were ready to help me even if it meant destroying the traditional neutrality of the Jade Palace. So I put him up to the task. Before I left the Jade Palace, I asked Shifu to let the students come to Gongmen City so that they could help the citizens if I were to fail. In a sense, they were not actually helping me since the Jade Palace is always on the people's side, but I called it that anyway. That might come as a surprise to some people since I had the mentality that I was invincible and I could do anything. But there was a fine line between believing in yourself and being stupid and delusional. So I had a backup plan in case I was not able to bear the might of 3 great powers/kingdoms. I asked you all to ensure the safety of the people if I failed, but since I did not, I no longer need your help. I said to the 6 young warriors in front of me. We were currently inside the main tent of the Gongmen army. Oh come on. Po whined, this an opportunity for me as the dragon warrior. I have to punish the 3 kingdoms for breaking the codes. To hear Po begging to be allowed to participate in a war would not have crossed anyone's mind from my other world. But things were not always as innocent as it appears to be. Po was still young and like any young warrior, he wanted fame and glory. Po in specific wanted to be awesome and his model of an awesome warrior was me. He was still young and had not developed his pacifist ideals. I agree, the enemies are still too much and while I have no doubt that you will come out victorious no matter the numbers, it will take you a great amount effort. Tigress said, please let us help you. You make a good point but you are still a student of the Jade Palace. You can't pick a side in a war like this. I said with a shake of my head. We are not just students of the Jade Palace, we are also your students. She persisted and the others nodded, and when has a student helping their master ever been wrong? I revealed a small smile of amusement. Crane hummed, he had something to say and he raised his wing in obvious nervousness. What is it, Crane? The problem you have seems to be that you don't want us to pick a side when the Jade Palace has always stayed neutral, right? Yes. But why does that even matter when you are going to unite China soon? I opened my mouth but no words came out. He was right, why even bother with the tradition if I was going to unite the whole of China anyways? All eyes were on me, they were hopeful. They were all warriors and they all wanted to fight alongside me and help in any way they could. I thought about it for a few more seconds before I decided, why not? It will be a good experience for them and it will be a good chance to see how much progress they have made. Fine. Yes, X6. The Furious 5 joined us in the war and with that, our force had been substantially enhanced. There was also a reinforcement that came from Shu in the form of 6 airships that contained hundreds of soldiers and most importantly, cannons and bombs. The Allied army took 4 days to soak up their defeat and to recover completely. After that, with the order from their respective king, they marched towards us again. But with all of the reinforcement that we had coupled with the fact that they had lost all of their big players, it was a downhill battle for them. They fought for the sake of order. Even they didn't believe they would win. Nevertheless, their forces were great in number so it took an entire 2 weeks to mow them down and for them to make an official surrender. I used the 2 weeks to improve my new techniques such as fire bending and Conqueror's Haki. It also served as a great teaching ground for my students. During the war, Po in specific seemed to learn many things and there included the aspect of the mind and spirit. During this time, I also heard the great news that the kingdom of Nanzhao had been conquered by Shen and his army. With most of their forces here and their greatest warrior, Mighty Eagle, being reduced to a cripple, they stood no chance against Shen and his newfound invention of airships. 2 weeks later. You shall all return to Gongmen City. Rejoice soldiers, you have done a marvelous job. You fought against impossible odds and came out victorious. I addressed the remaining soldiers as the war had officially ended and won. The city shall welcome you like the heroes you are. Enjoy yourself, you all deserve it. I said and allowed a rare genuine smile to appear on my face. The 6 of you as well, you have done a great job and your help was appreciated. But now it's time for you to return to the Jade Palace. I said and they nodded. But what about you? Monkey asked after raising his hand. Are you coming with us or with them? I have some unfinished businesses to attend to. I said. Everyone, I will see you in the next battle. Then I leapt into the air and used flash steps to blitz across the sky. I flew towards the east and my destination was the kingdom of Dali. There was one conversation I had with Shen in the past. I said if the enemy ever stop respecting the codes of war, I will make sure they regret it by dropping into their main capital and turning it to hell. Refer to Chapter 65. I am a leopard of my words. The warriors had paid the price but now it was time for the main people behind the attack to sow the same, the kings, the nobles, and the generals of the kingdoms. They all had exhausted most of their forces in the battle and they won't have time to react if I suddenly dropped into their city. Shen had also already conquered the kingdom of Nanzhou. So it's finally time to take over a kingdom by myself. Chapter 82, Judgment. 3rd POV. The city of Xiaoguan was the capital city of the kingdom of Dali. It was located in the eastern part of the region and it was selected as the capital because the king and most of the nobles lived here and because of its connection with the Silk Route. Xiaoguan was one of the main trading hubs of the Dali kingdom and many of the mining sites were located in this city. The economic backbone of the kingdom of Dali was mining minerals like gold, agriculture which was possible due to the Urhai Lake, and finally trade with Southeast Asia. Xianguan was a city where all these three trade flourished. It was a city which was almost twice as big as Gongmen City due to the sheer number of citizens gathering in this city full of opportunity. Like any metropolis city with a bustling economy, Xianguan was a great city with stunning infrastructure and impressive architecture. Due to its mining trade, there were many buildings made of silver and ornaments of gold. The city was always lively and never seemed to sleep. From late midnight to early in the morning, the city was always bustling with activity. The people of Xiaguan were not as diverse compared to the likes of Gongmen City and Milin City. The residents were made up entirely of the feline family, cat family. Seeing another species was a rare sight, and most of the time they were visitors. But even then, most of the visitors were also feline, as there exists discrimination against other races in the city. If you were a trader of another species coming to Xiaguan in search of opportunity, you would find yourself unable to sell your products properly and in the worst case, publicly robbed. Due to this reason, although Xiaguan was a great trading hub, its economy could never rival the likes of Gongmen City. It was like every other day. The sun was high in the sky, shining down on the great city without discrimination, unlike the citizens. The chilling air of the night had now become hot and humid. The city was especially busy ever since the alliance between the three kingdoms. Because the alliance was not only military but also trade. So the city finds itself with a diverse selection of animals and more people in this particular morning. But as life was ongoing, a threat loomed over the city. The people were unaware, yet the world seemed to foretell the disaster as dark clouds blocked the sun. The disaster came flying towards the city like a relentless storm, and when it was above the city, it dropped. Asterisk boom, asterisk. It crashed right at the heart of the city like a meteorite. Its thunderous explosion turned the head of every citizen. The busy city was stunned into silence as a powerful presence filled the space. The people thought maybe the sun itself had descended on the earth. It was suffocating. The city was about to pay the price for the mistake of its king. Judgment has come. Tai Lung's POV. I looked around the city of Xiaguan with a face void of any emotion. My landing had left a crater on the ground and my surrounding was destroyed by the shockwave. The dust settled and so did the silence. The people of the city, which were mostly felines, were rooted on their spot at the sight of my visage. Move! Get away quickly! The guards were quick to arrive at the scene and they pushed away the civilians, but they too froze like a statue when they saw me. They knew who I was, so they dared not move. Their body just gave up before their mind, and their instincts restricted movement because it knew that was the best move to survive. No movement. Hello there. I greeted them all with a small smirk on my face. Without my permission, there was no sound, there was no movement, and there was no hope. Then I moved, which looked like I teleported in their eyes. I appeared in front of the two guards and I grabbed their cat faces before I planted their heads to the ground and buried them between cracks and craters. Boom! I was crouching down, so I looked up and my eyes flashed yellow. Run! With my permission, there was sound and movement. Chaos descended on the city. Tai Lung is here. He is here. He is going to kill us all. It's Tai Lung. Ugh. I did not know what was wrong with being a civilian and running away while screaming, but it helped notify the others of what was going on, so I guess it was fine. Just as the villains were running away, the guards of the city ran towards me. They knew they had no chance. They knew I held the power of an entire kingdom, and they knew they would die. But they fought anyways. They protected the city and fulfilled their duty. Because what does a warrior do when faced with certain death? If it meant buying time for one citizen to escape, they were happy to throw their lives away. It was why I always held respect for warriors. They may run away in a war where they fight to obtain something, but when it came to protecting what they loved, they were willing to die. I took a long stride and slowly walked towards the king's castle. The guards rushed at me, but I was easily able to take them down and sent their body flying away to crash into buildings. I let them destroy what they were trying to protect, which was the city. I made sure to not kill the civilians though. I have standards. They were mostly feline, so their escape was swift and they were nimble enough to save their lives if I was not targeting them. But the luxurious city made of gold and silver, I brought it to ruin. The soldiers were not many, barely numbering in hundreds, and whatever strategy they tried, like crashing a building on top of me, it did not work. They can never do what 200,000 of them could not. The screams of the civilians, the battle cry of the city guards, and the explosion of buildings collapsing on each other made for a chaotic and frightening sound. The city could do nothing but fall on its knees under my single might. I was a farmer, sowing fear and mayhem to the city. This will forever be etched in the hearts of the people, and it will act as an example. Burn! I said, and blue flames erupted from my body like hellfire. The city started catching on fire as heat pulsated out in waves, melting the buildings and turning the solid earth into liquid lava. The guards could no longer even come close to me, so they opted to get out of the city as quickly as they could while also helping all the people get to safety. For a long time now, people have spread rumors about how I went on a rampage in a city and how I destroyed everything. But now, it was for real. I showed them what it was like when I really went on a rampage. I raised my arms and the flames obeyed my gesture. The fire rose up like a wave in the ocean and swallowed everything. The sound of flames burning was enough to rupture an ear. The air trembled due to the heat and the blue flames sapped everything of its life and glory. I raised my other arm and the same scene replayed. Then as I stepped on the ground, it cracked and broke into a million pieces before it turned scorched. I paved the road leading to the castle in hell. I stopped using fire bending and left the city to burn itself to the ground as I entered the castle. There was no one in sight as all of the guards and maids had left, but my sense did pick up one person in the throne room, so I made my way there with unhurried steps. The castle was extremely luxurious and filled with gold and furniture crafted with exceptional artistry, but everything looked dead and depressing in the emptiness. When I entered the throne room, I was met with the King of Dali, who was sitting proudly on the throne with his best attire. He was a lion with a body that you would mistake for a warrior's at first glance, but his dress tells his stars as a scholar. So it was a mistake. He asked me when he saw me. I saw fear at the depths of his eyes, but there was also a stubborn ego and pride. A grave one. It was my mistake. My people had nothing to do with it, he said with earnest eyes, but I remained silent. He gritted his teeth before he got up from the throne and walked towards me. When he was in front of me, he dropped his crown and went on his knees. The kingdom of Dali was on its knees. He begged me, please. He probably thought that I was a madman who would be willing to kill everything to satiate his anger. Crazy I might be, but I was not that kind. I gave him a short nod before I took a step back. I raised my hand high and gathered a huge amount of chi in my fist. Then I slammed it onto the ground as it caved in due to the force. Cracks spread throughout the castle made of stone and wood as it cried out, unable to bear the weight of my attack. It crumbled. The castle fell apart and broke down, burying its king in the derbies. Once the castle of a king, now it was a tomb. I broke through the derbies and shot out towards the sky. My next destination was the kingdom of Tang and the crocodile king who imprisoned me and later on tried to kill me. Chapter 83, Welcome to the New Era. Third POV. 1 month later. It has been 1 month since the destruction of both the capital cities of Dali and Tang. The king of each respective kingdoms were buried along the city. After the destruction of Xiaoguan city, Tai Lung immediately went after Chang'an city, which was the capital of the kingdom of Tang. The same scenario played out as Tai Lung brought the consequences of provoking the strongest in the world. He razed the city to the ground and turned the capital into ash before he took the head of the king of Tang, the crocodile king, and hung it on the gate outside the city. He was especially brutal with the crocodile king because of the history between them. Before Tai Lung was imprisoned, he had faced the crocodile king in his mission to stop a great war. And when Oogway decided to imprison Tai Lung, the king of Tang was the most active player to make that happen due to his hate for Tai Lung. Suffice it to say, he deserved what was coming for him. A month had passed, yet China had not settled into a peaceful state. The thousands of civilians whom Tai Lung spared, yet destroyed their homes, were left with nowhere to go. Even with their city destroyed, they dared not blame Tai Lung, and they shift all of their hatred towards their previous kings and their stupid decision to piss off someone who obviously should not be. Both kings went down as the most hated kings in history, especially the crocodile king. But it was at this moment of helplessness and broken mental state that Lord Shen came to them like an angel sent by the heavens. With their defeat in the war and their respective kings dead, the kingdom of Dali and Tang were absorbed into the unified China. Lord Shen had been busy managing the two kingdoms right after he was done settling things with the kingdom of Nanzhao. The people of both kingdoms were not as resistant to the new rule as you would expect. With their hatred for the previous king, it was not hard for them to leave their previous history behind and accept the new ruler. After all, it would be better to be under someone who befriend Tai Lung rather than make an enemy of him, right? That was the most important factors in everything. Tai Lung, after his achievement of repelling 200,000 soldiers and 4 great masters, Master Sloth, Holy Tiger, Turtle Monk, and Mighty Eagle, and his frightening ability to destroy 2 capital cities in a day and take over 2 kingdoms by himself, his status had elevated. His status was akin to that of a god. His influence alone was greater than any individual kingdom, and he had cemented his legacy in the history of China. In everyone's mind, he was someone on par with the likes of Oogway. He might not have as big of an impact overall, but Tai Lung was heavily involved with the matters of China and he was still alive, both of which Oogway was not. People were in absolute awe and fear of him. He was deemed as insurmountable, like the sun in the sky and the disasters of this world. He was seen as something which no one could defy. The unification of China, which was thought to be only a possibility, had now become a certainty. If Tai Lung wanted to unify China, it would happen. The kings of the 6 remaining kingdoms dared not even think about fighting a war anymore. They were merely staying neutral and were all waiting for things to settle down fully so that they could surrender before the other kingdoms in hopes of earning goodwill. This fact might come as a surprise to many people, but the kings could not be blamed. Tai Lung's feat of destroying 2 capitals and killing the kings in the span of 1 day might only be one of the great achievements Tai Lung had made to most people, but for the kings, it was the most terrifying feat. It meant that Tai Lung was willing to break the codes of war. He would not hesitate to drop into their capital and destroy everything while also killing each and every one of them. Even the kings were not safe. They were rightfully afraid. Further resistance was futile. They had watched it happen 2 times now, and they would be damned if they let themselves be the third. The fact that the kings of Dali and Tang were hated by their own people and had their legacy destroyed was also something the kings feared more than death. So as long as they would be spared and maybe allowed to continue their rule under the unification, they were willing to surrender and become the last kings of their kingdom. It was the end of an era. With his incredible strength, Tai Lung brought a new era to China. Welcome to the era of a unified China. Third POV. There better be a good reason why you have to summon me during my vacation, I said in a grumpy voice as I strode inside the throne room of the Tower of Sacred Place as if I owned the place. Which I did. Yes, sorry to disturb you during your vacation. How was the panda village? He asked me with a smile on his face as he sat on the throne which had a table. There were many schools and paper on the table including a map. It was good. I'm glad you failed to kill them all, they are cool people. Makes me almost want to hit you because of it. I said with a shrug and stood in front of him with my arms crossed. After the war was over, I thought it was high time I took a vacation where I could just relax and do some research on Chi. The panda village had always been on my mind, so I thought it was the perfect chance to visit it and have a vacation there. It took me a whole week to locate the village even with my flying ability and the clues I still remembered from the third movie. It almost felt like the universe was hiding it, but in the end, I found it. After I found it, I had a talk with Po where I basically tell him that his real father was alive and that he was not the last panda in the world. A rather dramatic reaction followed, and soon enough, everyone got to know that the pandas were still alive. I decided to take Po with me on my vacation, and although I did not intend it, his father also tagged along. His offer of cooking for me as I am on vacation was too good to deny. We went to the Kung Fu Panda and Po finally reunited with his family. I also tried to relax and rest for probably the first time in my life. The most I did was learn about Choi and meditation. Less than a week passed after that and we suddenly had visitors, the Furious Five. They were sent by Shen with a message that an emergency had emerged and he needed his general. Obviously, the secret Pav de Villaleg was still a secret and I would like it to stay that way, especially to the likes of Shen. Thus, why the Furious Five were sent here. Now here I am. In my small defense, I was young at that time and fighting against a prophecy. You know how that goes, he said, and I scoffed. As if you can defend yourself when you take the life of an innocent. I am not here to chat, get to the point, I said and tapped my foot on the floor. Shen paused and looked at me for a long time before he opened his mouth. His next words came slow but they hit me like a train. The enemies have made a big move. What? I growled. They still dare to oppose us? Which kingdom is it? I will deal with it quickly. No, not that, he said with a shake of his head. Remember our main goal, he said, and his wide eyes locked with mine. They challenged the seeds of insanity in mine. The other countries have made their move, he said. I got a message that there were movements from the Tibetan Empire and India. Chapter 84, Plans. Third POV. The world of Kung Fu Panda does not stop in China. Although only China was shown because it's the place where all of the main characters live, there exists the whole world outside it. China was considered a powerhouse of a country, and the only reason why its neighboring countries never saw it as a threat was because China was always busy fighting amongst themselves. But after the unification of China, everything changed. The emperors and kings from different countries were not oblivious. They all had ears, and so they heard exactly what was happening in China. What started off as a fantasy was now brought to reality in the span of a year by the so-called strongest warrior in the world, the Supreme General Tai Lung. Yes, they have heard of him. There were many people around the world who wanted to test that title, and there were more who were wary and prepared to put an end to his life. Especially for the Tibetan Empire, they were not new to the strength and might of Tai Lung, who had fought against them alone in their invasion of China. Rumor has it that he was even stronger now. The reactions to the change happening in China were different from ruler to ruler. While some saw an opportunity, the rest saw a threat if they let them grow. But their main objective seemed to all be aligned. If China was no longer fighting amongst themselves and destroying each other, then we have to destroy them. This train of thought came to be because of the stark fact that China was easily the most powerful country that housed the most powerhouse. Greed and fear were never a good combination. Tai Lung's POV. Movements. I asked. Elaborate. My spies have noticed that India and Tibet are sending messengers and convoys to each other. They are establishing friendly relations and they are stationing their army closer and closer to our borders, he said, and threw a scroll at me. I opened the scroll and read the contents. It was a detailed report of what was happening between the two countries. Driven by greed, I asked and threw the scroll back at him as I was done reading. And fear, Shen added with a smile that looked oddly pleased. They think we are at our weakest, and they also know that if they allow us to grow, a unified China can take over their territory and overthrow their rule. They are correct in both assumptions, he said. China was at the weakest it had ever been, with internal conflicts and the chaotic aftermath of a new rule. And although it was said that China had been unified, it was not completely true. There are 4 remaining kingdoms which had yet to be brought under our rule. But it was only a short matter of time and the unification was inevitable, so it was already said to be unified. It was actually not. It would take a year or 2 for that statement to be completely true. The Tibetan Empire had always been in conflict with China and was always looking for an opportunity to expand its territory. So it was not a surprise that they wanted to attack China while it was at its weakest and try to grasp whatever it could gain in our times of chaos. Tibet on its own was not that much of a threat. But what if it allied with India in its conquest to invade China? Now that was a different beast entirely. Firstly, Tibet and India were neighboring countries, and if they worked together, Tibet would be much stronger because it wouldn't have to worry about an attack from India while it was invading China. This way, Tibet would be able to spare more military forces. And India by itself was probably the most powerful country in the world. Even more powerful than China in its current situation. Things were a little different in this world than in my previous world. The different regions of the world are still classified as countries, but each country has their own rulers. In the country of Tibet, there is the Tibetan Empire. In the country of India, there is the Gupta Empire. In the country of Europe, there is the Umayyad Empire. In the country of Korea, there is a new empire Silla. And so on. Most of these countries are controlled by an empire. China was the odd one when the country used to be constituted of 10 different kingdoms called the 10 Great Powers. Usually, different countries rarely get into conflict with each other and they are busy in their own country. But these changes when one country is united under one banner. And when they were united, they wanted to expand their territory. Thus the conflict expanded into a world war. In specific, China was a coveted land with its richness and beautiful nature. So all the empires have always wanted a piece of China. Now that they had the chance, they will come after it. After all, what better time than now when China was at its weakest with its great protector Oogway's death. China was truly in its most vulnerable state. So what are we going to do? I asked Shen. I allied with him because of his political expertise and sharp mind, so I let him do his job. Shen shook his head. It's about what we are going to do. It's about what you need to do. Oh, I want you to be stationed on our southwestern border so that you can slow down or maybe even stop the invasion that would inevitably come from India and Tibet, he said with careful words. I do not need help in taking the remaining kingdoms under our rule. We eclipsed them in sheer numbers and I can take care of any small invasion from the north and the east. They only consisted of small nomadic tribes. Korea is also only recently unified, therefore they would not attack. Our main problem is from Tibet and India and I want you to be there to stop them, he said. I paused and I processed his words before I showed a smile. Seems simple enough. Yes. Especially if you went to the borders between India and Tibet and sow some conflicts. Make them distrustful of each other so that they won't ally. That way it would be easier, he suggested. On other days, I would scoff and say how cowardly and dishonorable it was. But if the last war had taught me anything, it was that there was no honor in a war. So I took the advice to heart as something which I can do. After that, we both had a long discussion about what his other plans for China were and what his objectives would be while I was away. We also discussed when I would leave and how long I would need to stay there. In the end, we stopped our meeting when the sun had set. I shall leave in a month. Chapter 85, Reputation. Tai Lung's POV. The meeting went well as expected even though it was called an emergency meeting. It was called as such because Shen needed to make a major decision as quickly as possible and he won't do that without me. It was not because there was an urgent attack or anything like that. We talked about a lot of stuff which was mostly related to the military since I was the general. I didn't care much about other politics. One of the interesting things we talked about was the creation of mortars which would be extremely useful in taking over the kingdoms in the north which was a hilly region. Shen also said that he was in the middle of a project. Said project was making a giant airship to carry infantries who would be dropped to the battleground with the help of parachutes. On the issue of Tibet and India, there was nothing else to do other than sending the soldiers of Nanzhao to the borders to guard in case of an attack. There was not much information to work with. Nevertheless, issues such as two countries making an alliance takes time so there was no need to rush. It was decided that I would leave after a month and until then, I could continue enjoying my vacation. I leapt down from the throne room because God knew I was not going to climb down all those stairs. I landed on the ground in a controlled manner that barely made a sound. Then I left the grounds of the Peacock and went to the city. The soldiers bowed at me with respect and admiration as I walked out. I no longer wore a cloak to hide myself as I walked through the districts of Gongmen City. I held my nose high and my chest forward as I observed the city which we had fought hard to protect. The time of mourning was over and the citizens who had left the city, fearing that it would be destroyed, had also returned and settled back. A sense of joy and security achievable only by winning a war filled the city. The citizens gathered around me but they knew to stay far away and made a path for me. They admired me from the sides, whispering to themselves praises about me. My ears twitched as for the first time, I tried to hear everything they had to say. It felt good. But their admiration was also layered with a rightful amount of fear. Like a sailor gazing at the endless expanse of an ocean, awed at its infinite depth and calm yet also being acutely aware that it could drown the world. From a rumored criminal and a villain, I became their hero. The warrior who fought against 3 kingdoms to protect them from harm. They were regretful of how they treated me in the past and wondered if there was anything they could do to make up for it. But they couldn't find an answer so they stared from a distance not too far yet not too close. But then a young rabbit slipped away from the crowd. His tiny body and nimble frame escaped his mother's grasp and he ran towards me with a toy in his hand. Master Tai Lung. He called me with a huge smile that showed all his rabbit teeth. He did not know why the people were hesitating to approach me because he was too innocent. He only saw the good in the world, he only saw the good in me. The perspective he had was how I protected his home from a huge invasion. The number of soldiers I had to slaughter to protect never crossed his mind. Thank you for saving the city, he said with a bow. His feet tapped on the ground with excitement as I looked at the oddball. Then my eye caught the toy he had in his hand. It was a figurine, like the ones Poe had in his room which consisted of the Furious 5. But this one was a figurine of me. Nice toy you got there, I said with a small smirk and a raised eyebrow. Thank you, this one is my favorite, he said and showed it to me. I didn't know why I felt proud to hear him say that. Really, but I see it's missing something, I said and took the toy from his hand. Then I made a small scar on his chest with my claws. See, I said and showed him the new scar on my chest. It was a claw mark left by Master White Tiger. The wound he made turned into a scar because the poison had damaged it beyond normal injury. It was a mark of his dishonor and also a proof of how I stood unfazed in front of deceit and tricks. Cool, he said and quickly took his toy from my hand. He looked at it with wide, shining eyes. Then his mother hurriedly came to him and grabbed him by the hand before pulling him away with a small apology. I just shook my head and waved at the little kid. I walked through the different districts and when I was near the gate of the city, I leapt into the air and flew back towards the panda village. The panda village sits at the peak of the Rocky Mountains in the northeastern part of China. The region was filled with ice and the low temperature made it so that no vegetation could grow there. It was an isolated place where no one lives, unless of course the pandas. The thick ice and constant snowstorms made it extremely difficult to find if you did not know what you were looking for. The panda village was surrounded by a towering barrier of mountains amid the glacier. The village was built on the ground of a geothermal spring which melted the ice around the village and it was for this reason that the pandas could cultivate and live there. It was a hidden paradise, uncorrupted by the world outside. It made you wonder if the pandas as a species were favored by the universe itself for them to stumble upon such marvelous land. I made a beeline to the place as I propelled myself through the icy storm winds using flash steps. I landed on the entrance of the village with a soft thud and I finally took a breath that did not chill my lungs. Warm air. HAAA. I released a sigh and looked down from the small hill. From my position, I could get a perfect view of the panda village and it was one of the most beautiful sights I had ever seen. It was something I would imagine when I think of heaven in my past life. The pandas were all farmers and I could see some of them working diligently with a smile on their face. Even though it was located in a region that looked like Antarctica, the land of the panda village was fertile and bore great harvest even without much work. It was a land as precious as gold. I felt relaxed, not only in my body but in spirit as I felt the wonderful chi soothe my spirit. It was strange how the village was so abundant with chi and the quality was unlike I had never seen before. Maybe it had something to do with the pandas themselves rather than the land. I saw Tigress pulling down a tree from a distance. The tree bent down in ways it should not and Tigress used it as a way to propel herself like a spring. Her body shot through the air and she landed right next to me. "You're back," she said with a smile. "Yes, it took less time than I thought it would," I responded. "So what was it about?" she asked in a curious tone as she stood next to me. "Oh, nothing much. New enemies on the horizon, this time they are from Tibet and India," I said with a shrug. She gave me a complicated look, likely due to how carefree I was about it. "So this does not bother you. Why should it bother me? I always have enemies." "No, not that," she said. "I mean they are from Tibet and India. I heard the armies of the Indian Gupta were vast and powerful." I chuckled. "As long as they bleed, I have no worries. It's the spirit warriors which I am wary of, not some vast and powerful soldiers. After all, fear quantity and quality just meant that I had to put in a little more effort." "Okay then, seems like I was worrying for nothing," she said. A pleasant silence befell us as we just enjoyed the view of the village. My eyes caught the sight of Po who was rolling down the mountain and constantly hitting either a rock or a tree. He was hurt each time but his enthusiasm never left him as he tried again and again with his father. He was trying to discover who he was, and when he felt that he was getting there, it made him happy. He was a panda. I ducked my head as a bird flew past me with a gust of wind. I pulled my head back up and looked at Crane who was flying in front of me. He was carrying a red blanket in his talons where multiple baby were wrappy. They giggled in childish joy. "Oh hi guys," he said and tipped his hat at us. "Careful where you are flying, Crane," Tigress said immediately, concerned for my safety you might hurt the babies. Or maybe not. I chuckled as I saw her serious face. She had gotten extremely close to the baby pandas in the village. They even called her Stripey Baby. "Come join us, it's lunchtime." Crane invited us and he spun in the air to the joy of the babies. Then he flew away and towards the village again. I saw Po and the rest of the pandas going back to the village as well where I smelled some good food. "Shall we?" Tigress said and gestured down the hill. "If you are trying to make me roll down the hill like a complete fool then I will ask you to stop," I said, offended at the mere idea. "What? It's their customs and while we are here, we must respect it," she said all too amused. I guess that made sense, as the saying goes when in Rome, do as the Romans do, but I was still not doing it. "Don't tell me you haven't learned to roll yet?" Po is still learning it now even as a panda and the dragon warrior. "Can you not do it?" she asked. Cheap tricks, she was a decade too young if she thought she could make me do it with those words. I scoffed. But then she got low and swiped my feet off the ground. I saw it coming but I chose not to stop it as I fell from my place and rolled down the hill. Well, if I was already rolling, I might as well commit and become the best at this thing. Later that week, in a rolling competition where the winner gets 100 bowls of dumplings, I won against all the villagers and defeated the dragon warrior again. Tai Lung 2, Dragon Warrior, 0. Take that stupid fate. Chapter 86, Interlude. Third POV. China was experiencing the biggest change in all of its history. Previously ruled by different tribes, kingdoms, and empires, now it was going to be united under one banner, under one rule. It was made possible by the alliance between the strongest warrior in the world, Tai Lung, and the genius prince of Gongmen City, Shen. They were a duo that would undoubtedly go down in history, for in the span of less than a year, they have achieved what their ancestors couldn't do for millennia. But such achievement was to be expected from those who dared dream of conquering the whole world. A new era had emerged in China. An era which was more peaceful and promising than the one before. It would be a common deduction to think that China would be at its weakest and struggling to adapt to the change of this new era, but such assumptions would be wrong. Instead of struggling to adapt, China and all its people were thriving in this new era. With Lord Shen's political genius and Tai Lung's godlike reputation, there was no trouble like most people would assume. Shen was extremely intelligent and cunning in his schemes such that he was able to unite the kingdoms after their defeat without much trouble. Even the kingdoms which were at each other's throats the year before had accepted being together. There was no revolt or internal conflicts. It was not that no one was opposed to the new rule, but they knew they couldn't do anything. Their idea to revolt and resist the new rule diminished with each new achievements that Tai Lung made until they thought to themselves, why bother? He was the strongest warrior. Their resistance was futile, so they just accepted their situation. No one wants to die a meaningless death after all. In return for this fear and respect for Tai Lung, Lord Shen's words, which were the same as Tai Lung's because of their alliance, were respected and taken with respect. They obeyed whatever orders they received. And with such obedience, Shen was able to achieve his goal, which was the prosperity of China. The 6 kingdoms which were already united were thriving like never before. With the lack of constant wars and the need for vigilant soldiers at the borders, the roads and the cities were much safer. Most bandits dared not attack the merchants of the united China, so trade thrived. The economy of the kingdoms combined and morphed into something more than it ever was. The cities which were raised in Tai Lung's anger were also being slowly rebuilt and in a few years, would regain their prosperity. And the military might was not at an all-time low as the rulers outside of China might expect. Instead it was quite opposite because of Tai Lung. The change happening in China seemed to be for good. In the tavern of one of the cities, a group of people were crowding near one specific table as they wanted to hear what the guy sitting there had to say. It was a bear who was on the older side, and he was retelling an event which happened 23 years ago with vivid detail. And on that day, no one believed Tai Lung was going to triumph over Master Lishao. He was known for his unstoppable strength and impenetrable defense. He was a behemoth, a giant which no one thought would fall to the likes of a young warrior like Tai Lung. He said, and his audience listened well. At the center of the city, the fight took place. All of the citizens gathered to watch the fight because seeing Master Lishao fight was a privilege, and no one wanted to miss it. We made bets on how many hits Tai Lung would be able to take before he fell. I prayed that Tai Lung lasted at least a few hits so that I would be able to admire Master Lishao's techniques. He said and paused. Everyone could already guess what happened next, but they wanted to hear it anyway. But we were all so wrong. Tai Lung was able to defeat the unstoppable force, the warrior who supposedly had never fell with but a single finger. The old bear said and showed off one finger. The audience owed and act. One touch, to make Master Lishao fall on his knees, peeing himself in fear. It was not a fight, it was public humiliation. He had boasted a title he should not have. He had claimed to be all-powerful when he shared the land with Tai Lung, and he paid dearly for it. A few years later, Master Lishao took his own life, unable to live with the shame. He finished the story. Whoa, so is that why his son, Master Wubeo, fought against Tai Lung after he broke out of prison? It was to take revenge. One of the audience said in realization as the crowd nodded, absorbing that small knowledge. So in the end, Wubeo himself was the one causing the destruction of the city and not Tai Lung. Duh. You think the Milan city will still stand today if he really went on a rampage? I am from Xiaoguan, so I can tell you, if he really went on a rampage, Milan would have suffered the same fate as we did. Complete annihilation. Everything I owned, burned away in a single day. THA's tough buddy. You must be angry at Tai Lung. Tai Lung? PTFF nah. I am angry at the stupid king who decided that it was a good idea to not only attempt to kill Tai Lung but also break the codes of war to piss him off. The tavern bustles with discussions and activity. The tales of Tai Lung in his heydays, which had died down after his imprisonment and almost seemed surpassed by fate, began emerging again. Shen, who had spread bad words about Tai Lung before they became allies, did the opposite after their alliance and tired to give a boost to Tai Lung's already high reputation. In the end, he also benefited when Tai Lung was feared and respected, so he was also working on that, the spirit realm. A brilliant golden chi clashed with corrupted green in an explosion that destroyed the floating mass of land. The great land flew away in broken fragments everywhere. The spirit realm, meant to be the resting place of kung fu masters, was opposite to what it was supposed to be. It was hell. It was a hunting ground where the kung fu masters were prey, cursed to run away from the villain clad in green light. You are getting weaker, Oogway. Kai screamed and shot out like a missile towards Oogway. Master Oogway struggled but managed to dodge Kai, who whizzed past him and crashed into a flying mountain in the distance, destroying it. Kai had gotten more and more powerful. In the movies, he was not this strong while he was in the spirit realm. But due to Tai Lung's influence, more and more masters whose chi he was supposed to get only after escaping the spirit realm died and gave Kai the opportunity to obtain them earlier. He was now as strong as he was when he faced Po in the movies. And I am only getting stronger, Kai said as he emerged from the derbies with a smile on his face. He had finally absorbed the chi of all the Kung Fu masters who died in the War of Gongmen City, which included Master Chroch and Ox, who died instantly in Mighty Eagle's attack. Alpha was also one of the chi he absorbed. The spirit realm was not an afterlife where everyone can go. It was a place where mutated chi, which the universe could no longer recycle, went after they died. People with mutated chi were mostly kung fu masters who had done so by dedicating their lives to their kung fu. There is no alternative where you come out as the victor. It is only a matter of time, he said and tugged at his chain and caught his green blades. Maybe, maybe not, Oogway said with a small laugh that held no amusement. It was a mask to hide his worry. But at least I am not alone anymore, right dear nephew? Oogway asked with a smile towards the turtle monk. Ugh, don't bring me into this, Turtle Monk said while scratching his head, floating beside Oogway. He was not among the kung fu masters Kai absorbed because he was a monk, not a kung fu master. He could fight, but he rarely does. I don't see why we have to sacrifice our eternal peace to fight someone like him. Why not just send him directly to the final boss? Turtle Monk asked with a lazy stretch to his words. Tai Lung. Yeah, I'm sure he can deal with him, although it might take some effort. We are only making him stronger by keeping him here, Turtle Monk said. Oogway hummed before closing his eyes. He sent his sense to the mortal realm where he saw the scene of Tai Lung and the Furious Five, along with Po enjoying their time in the panda village. Tai Lung was trying to teach them how to utilize their chi, but the pandas were very bad students. Or should he say Tai Lung was a bad teacher? He could only teach through hardcore training and was new to teaching soft civilians. Tai Lung was also helping them grow their crops master, which was a way for him to practice the restoration side of his chi, and every day was a huge feast due to the generous harvest. Oogway opened his eyes. Let's give him some more time. How long is some more time? Turtle Monk asked. As long as we can. It was true that Kai was getting stronger, but Tai Lung himself was getting stronger faster than Kai. Oogway believed that given some more time, Tai Lung would be able to defeat Kai easily instead of with some effort. There would be a higher chance of victory for Tai Lung, who was not meant to defeat Kai, at least as long as Kai remained the same strength he was in the movies. Chapter 87, Not Enough. Tai Lung's POV. What are you? I asked Po as he sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. Are you the son of a goose? But he is not your real father, is he? I walked around him and whispered close to his ear. Are the son of a panda, but you've only known him for a month. His eyes twitched and shut tightly. I felt his breath hitched as he tried to find out exactly who he was. He was searching for answers. Answers which I could not tell him, answers which only he can find in himself. Are you a warrior? Like me? No. Are you the dragon warrior? You've been the dragon warrior for only a year. Are you not a noodle maker more than a warrior? I got no answer and I saw his shoulders slump down ever so slightly and her eyes became closely shut. He gave up. You want to harness the power of chi, yet you don't even know who you are, I said with a shake of my head. I was hoping that with my help and with him visiting the panda village earlier than in the movies, he would be able to master chi quicker, but I guess maybe it's impossible to make such growth without an adversary. How do you do it? How do you find out who you were? Po asked me with earnest eyes. By being chained down at the bottom of a dark cave for 20 years, I said in a matter-of-fact tone. Oh, is there an easier way to master chi? There is, and I am trying to teach you right now. I said, you are the dragon warrior, the universe is literally a sim for you, so out of all the masters, you should have the least difficulty mastering chi. I don't know what that means, but okay, Po said with a smile. You can go now, but continue to ask yourself that question every moment of the day. Who are you? And when you find the answer, make sure you tell me, I said and gave him a small smile before I sent him away to play around in the village. Thank you, Master Tai Lung. He waved at me as he ran, but then he tripped on his own leg and started rolling down the hill comically. Can't believe he is one of the strongest living masters in China, I said to myself in an amused smile. It was a humorous truth. I sat down on the ground and started doing my own meditation, but unlike Po, I was already proficient in using my chi, yet I still faced a problem of my own. Let's start with an undeniable fact about me. I learned from my battles, and there were 3 vital things that became apparent in my last battle. First was the fact that I was a horrible aerial fighter, which made sense because it had been less than a year since I learned how to fly, so the fact that I was fucking pathetic in the air was no surprise. I was so weak in the air that Mighty Eagle was able to destroy me every second we fought. Some might think that it was not a serious issue since I was undoubtedly the strongest, but I knew it could be vital. Mighty Eagle was probably the strongest warrior in the sky, so it was exactly not fair to compare myself to him, but I knew there were other strong warriors like him all over China. If we include the world, there might be someone on par with him. So I needed to get stronger and train until I was as strong in the air as I was on land. The second thing I learned was that sometimes, I get too caught up with my own amusement and prioritize honor and dignity. All is fair in love and war. Just because there are some things I would never do as a warrior, doesn't mean that my enemies have the same morals. Especially when they are so unquestionably outmatched, it is easy for them to throw away all their morals and try to survive with everything they had. So I should stop holding back and expect deceit and trickery in every battle. The third and the most important thing I learned in my battle was, I did not have nearly as much chi as I thought I did. Don't get me wrong, I have a shit ton of chi compared to other warriors. With one of my 2 chi alone, I was already second to only Po when it comes to the quantity of chi. But with my other chi, I outclassed everyone else by a mile and I was capable of fighting for days. That was the truth until I started developing techniques which I like to call army killing techniques. These are techniques that affect a large area like fire bending, conqueror's haki and even kamehameha. They took a great amount of chi to execute. If I used such techniques, I wouldn't even last a day. So in conclusion, as a warrior, I had more than enough chi, but as the supreme general who is supposed to go against an army even when outnumbered 100,000 to 1, I was extremely lacking. With my future plan of world conquest on the horizon, where I would undoubtedly have to go against even bigger armies, I needed to find a solution to enlarge my chi reserves, or at least find an alternative. Which is very possible with my nigh infinite amount of knowledge of different worlds. I smiled. The strength of 100 seals used by Tsunade Senju from Naruto. I said out loud as a chilling breeze from outside the village blew on my fur. That was one alternative I could use. Using the concept behind the 100 seals, I could maybe create something that I can use to store my excess chi, which I would then be able to use in battle. It didn't even have to be my own chi. The world itself was made up of chi. Surely I would be able to find a way to store that chi and use it for myself given enough time. Chi was the fuel of the miracles after all. You only need a strong concept and enough willpower. We could even go further in that direction and try to control the chi of the world. Something like Sage Mode from Naruto, and if I could use the chi of the world, I would have infinite chi. Or maybe I could take a note from Kai and find a way to steal the chi of the people I slay for myself. Store the chi of my dead enemies to empower myself. So many possibilities. The only problem was finding the quickest way. My enemies nor the universe was going to wait for me to invent a technique to make myself literally invincible. 1 month was nearly not enough. I chewed on my lips as I contemplated what I should do. Third POV. After defeating the allied forces of the Three Kingdoms, Dali, Nanzao, Tang, Tai Lung went to the hidden village of the pandas in the north to further his understanding of chi. He also took his disciple, the dragon warrior, with him to help the young warrior in finding his true self. Shifu in the library of the Jade Palace, writing all of these on a scroll which was titled The Life of Tai Lung. It was not the first time the Jade Palace had kept records of someone's life like this. These were important records that would be kept locked up and would be later on used by historians to learn about the past. A small smile was permanent on Shifu's face as he wrote about the life of his son. As his father and his teacher, he was someone who knew the most about Tai Lung. He had used the time his disciples went to the panda village as a chance to write these records. From the day he found Tai Lung until now, he was writing a detailed biography from his perspective. And like any father, he was extremely proud as he recalled the amazing feats and achievements his son had made. It didn't seem like his son would slow down in his achievements anytime soon either. Tai Lung has become a household name in China. His title as the strongest warrior in the world and the 11th power of China was well known even outside of China. His name had become synonymous with power. The unification continued in China, but with Tai Lung's presence, there was no real resistance, only weak protest to protect their honor rather than their land. Shifu could not wait to see what his son would achieve next. He prayed that fate and destiny be kind to his dear son, and he will live on till the end and watch his son change the world. Chapter 88, 3000 vs 500. Third POV. Gongmen City, the Tower of Sacred Flames. Lord Shen. The voice of Boss Wolf echoed in the silence of the tower. The rapid sound of his footfalls came right after as he quickly climbed up the stairs that led to the throne room. Lord Shen. He called again, much to the annoyance of Shen, who cringed at the disturbance. What is it? He asked in a not too friendly tone. It promised consequences if whatever news he brought with him was not an emergency. My lord. Boss Wolf slid to a stop right before the throne where Shen sat majestically. He had glasses in his eyes and he was reading a long scroll. And then in the silence, came the shocking news. An army from Tibet is approaching our borders. Boss Wolf said with the utmost seriousness in his voice. What did you say? Our scouts have noticed an army of Tibet marching towards our borders in Nanzao. Boss Wolf repeated himself and Shen was forced to believe the news. It was completely illogical. Why did Tibet suddenly decide to attack them now? It has been only 2 weeks since he got the news that they were a threat and he called an emergency meeting with Tai Lung. They were not supposed to move this fast. They were not supposed to have the nerve to attack them without the backing of India. Even if they were sure that they could win against China, they would be weakened enough in the war that the other empires would destroy them afterwards. And relations between countries or empires do not work that fast. It would require at least half a year of marriage between the sons and daughters of the respective emperor to have such quick alliances. By all logic and common sense in the world, this attack was absolutely unexpected. How many? Boss Wolf said and scratched his head. Around 500 soldiers. Shen released a sigh he did not know he was holding before he quickly barked at him. Stupid mutt, say that first. Sorry, my lord. 500 soldiers, huh? So that means that it was not an attack. There were around 3,000 soldiers stationed at the borders with multiple cannons on the walls surrounding it, so there was no way it could be an attack. So it was something else. Was it a message? A party sent for negotiation? Tell the commander stationed on the border to deal with them. Try to settle things peacefully, and even if they really are here for talk or negotiate, do not hesitate to bend a knee. We don't want to cause trouble now. Remember, we are the ones who need to buy time. Shen said to Boss Wolf, who nodded after carefully listening. As you wish, my lord. Boss Wolf said and bowed before he ran back down the stairs to send a message to the commander in charge of the borders. Shen shook his head as he watched his most trusted subordinate leave. He had nearly given him a heart attack, thinking Tibet had made a move so quickly. But it seemed it was nothing serious. If only he had paid more focus onto the task. Maybe he would have saved the lives of 3,000 soldiers. Third POV. The Tibetan Empire, the borders of Tibet and China. You guys are not the brightest bunch, are you? The commander of China said with a shake of his head as he looked at the Tibetan army who was taking out their weapons and getting ready to fight. They were 3,000 strong while the enemy was only 500 in number. Yet they were trying to attack them here. The Tibetan army had asked for a talk a bit further into the Tibetan territory, claiming that they do not feel safe so close to the wall where the cannons could fire at them. Getting the orders from Shen that he should try to not cause trouble, the commander decided that it was no harm to follow them and move away from the walls. After all, they were 500 while he had 3,000 soldiers with him. What could possibly have gone wrong? Soldiers, get ready. The enemy commander, a tiger with well-developed muscle and armor, said as the 500 soldiers slowly surrounded the bigger army. PFTT, I have heard of the arrogance of Tibet, but to think you guys are this delusional, said the commander of China, a giant gorilla. Fine, you guys shall die today, the gorilla said, and he took in a deep breath to puff out his chest. Then he beat it like a drum. We have tried our best to maintain peace, but the enemy has turned on us. Get ready, he said, and the soldiers pulled out their swords and grabbed their spears horizontally at the lesser enemy who were slowly surrounding them. Huh. The gorilla looked at the strange thing at the back of the Tibetan commander. It was a cage. But the odd thing about this cage was that it seemed to focus more on keeping people out than keeping someone in. It was also coated with a net-like steel structure which would have made it impossible to snipe through with an arrow or other projectile. And inside the cage was someone. The gorilla could not see it properly, but it was a female who was heavily dressed. She was also holding a silver bell in her hand. It was an odd sight. Something which the commander of Shen decided to ignore now that the enemy had surrounded them. Attack! He screamed with the confidence of a victor. He was leading an army of 3,000, heavily outnumbering the enemy. It did not matter that the enemy surrounded them or that they were ambushed. They were going to slaughter some Tibetan cunts today. He led the attack and charged directly at the closest enemy. He brought up his were-axe and was about to slash at the Tibetan soldiers, but something was wrong. Something deep down inside him knew that things were not as it was supposed to be. Ting ding ding. The sound of a bell came from the cage. It was soft, but even amidst the warcry and the clatter of steel, they could hear it. Reality listened and acknowledged the sound. Hey. The commander swung at the enemy soldier anyway, but he noticed something different. His limbs won't listen to him properly. They felt like noodles, a feeling you would experience right after waking up early in the morning. His muscles became rigid, and even as he swung his weapon, he lost his precision and the enemy soldier was able to dodge his swing. What the? Gorilla muttered in disbelief, and the soldiers fought back. He tried to shrug off the sluggish feeling in his body and exchanged some blows with them. But then it happened again. Ting ding ding. This time, he felt heavier than before. Gravity became unkind to him as he felt his weight increase dramatically. The cruel pull of the earth made his movements slower, and he was unable to dodge the slash that came his way. Their sword left a slash mark on his shoulder. Damn you! He screamed, and using all his strength, he swung upwards, putting his injured shoulder to its final work. His swing connects this time and bisected the enemy soldier in half. I don't know what tricks you are using, but it won't work. We are the soldiers of Tai Lung. He screamed and charged towards the enemy again. His soldiers followed. They had also felt the same negative effect as the bell rang, but they pushed through with sheer will. But it happened again. Ting ding ding. Air becomes thick. They could not get a proper breath, because each breath was full of carbon. It felt like oxygen itself was avoiding them, and each breath was not relieving. It was not noticeable at first, but then a few minutes later, they were out of their breath. Without the necessary oxygen, they were already getting tired. Ha 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 ha. Not so tough now, huh? The commander of Tibet laughed as he looked at them. Ting ding ding. Gorilla anticipated another weakness, but this time, he felt no change. The soldiers of China, thinking that the enemy had run out of tricks, rushed at the Tibets with new hope. The commander gorilla swung his weapon, ready to chop off the heads of these outsiders, but then a strange sight greeted him. Cling! Somehow, the enemy blocked his attack. It was a feat which they were not able to do until now. Then it hit him. This time they did not get weaker, but the enemy got stronger. Ting ding ding. Asterisk swoosh, asterisk. The soldier's spear whizzed right past his cheek at a speed much faster than before. The attack seemed to be blessed by the air itself, as it made a swift cutting sound. The fight continued between the 3,000-strong Chinese army and the 500 Tibetan army. But with each sound of the bell, the army of Shen and Tai Lung was getting beaten worse and worse. At one point, it felt like a dream to them. A dream where they couldn't hit as hard as they wanted, where they couldn't run as fast as they wanted, where all their efforts were squashed. They were cursed by the world. Yet their enemy got stronger and stronger like a dreaded nightmare. It's you? The gorilla screamed, and after gathering all of his final strength, he pushed through the enemy lines and made a beeline straight to the cage and the female inside. If he could kill her, maybe this strange phenomenon would stop. He was able to catch her image. She had white ears and tails which were eerily similar to that of the Supreme General, but her face and limbs were all covered by clothes. She shook her silver bell. Ting ding ding. Gravity pulled him down harder, trying to subdue him. He lost his footing due to the sudden change in weight and he stumbled. Right then, the enemy commander came to him and plunged a sword through his heart. I'm gonna die. The words rang in his mind as crimson blood spilled out his chest. But he didn't want to go down so easily. He gathered all of his remaining strength, and he was about to lash out at the enemy commander, but... Ting ding ding. The world forbade him. All of his strength left him as he went limp like a corpse. The last thing he saw was the cruel smile of the enemy commander. His tiger face filled with amusement. And his soldiers were losing the battle with a lesser army. Their frustrated scream filled his ears and the sound of steel clashing steel pierced his eardrum. Kill them all. Then the commander's world went dark as death claimed him. Chapter 89, Priestess of Infinity. Third POV. The 500-strong Tibetan army completely annihilated the soldiers stationed at the border. They lured them out first with the promise of negotiation and then surrounded them. All 3,000 soldiers were killed in this short battle that went on for only a few hours. They had never faced an opponent like them before, so they could not even react properly. The Tibetan army went to the walls after the battle and there were a few soldiers remaining on the walls. But they were easily subjugated and then the Tibet soldiers got the gunpowder and cannons stationed at the walls. That was their main objective. They returned as soon as possible to avoid any reinforcement. They had done what they had come to do, which was to steal the technology of gunpowder and cannons from the Chinese. It would not be easy to replicate it, but as long as they knew the weakness and have a general idea of how their weapons worked, they would be able to come up with counterattacks. That's what the Emperor of Tibet wanted. They returned to the main city of Tibet with their quest being a complete success. Gongmen City, Tower of Sacred Flames. What? Shen said with wide insane eyes that were bloodshot due to the intense emotion he was feeling. The atmosphere in the room froze under his crazed eyes as the people inside the throne room looked down in odd fear. My lord, the soldiers stationed on the borders of Nanzhao had been annihilated and the Tibetan soldiers took all of the cannons and gunpowder kept in the walls. His eyelid twitched and he felt his heart boil in a silent rage, seething at himself. He was angry, not at anyone else but at himself. How ridiculous, how fucking pathetic. With Tai Lung by his side, he had gotten too used to winning. He rarely faced any challenges and Tai Lung was the one who overcame all the odds. He had gotten lazy. And when it was his turn, he couldn't even complete a simple thing. He should have known not to underestimate his enemies. That was how he got to where he was in the first place, because people underestimated him. He should have known better. It's unacceptable. My lord, what shall we do? Should contact General Dash. No. He yelled at his subjects. They can't keep on turning to Tai Lung when things go wrong. They need to learn how to deal with things themselves. He was allied with Tai Lung. He was not supposed to be the only one doing all the hard work. Shen had promised a month's vacation to Tai Lung and he will not go back to his words. He will deal with the situation himself. He had been taking things too slowly. Even until now, the four kingdoms had not been subjugated and China was not truly unified. He thought he would take it slow, try and incorporate a proper system for a unified China first, but now he realizes that was a mistake. He can't take things slow. He did not have such privilege when enemies were surrounding him like a pack of hungry hyenas. He had to continue the momentum until he completed his final objective. He can't stop midway to take a rest or take it slow. Third POV. You have all done a great job in defeating the army of China and bringing home the weapons of black power. To celebrate, I shall throw a feast for everyone. The Emperor of Tibet said with a wide smile on his face. He was a Tibetan antelope, otherwise known as Chiro, and he had inherited his throne from his father who inherited it from his father. The Tibetan Empire is a long-standing dynasty that has existed for many generations. The Tibetan Empire was not big when it came to territory. The empire was only the size of 3 great kingdoms of China. Since they were so close to China, they were also influenced by Kung Fu and the teachings of Master Oogway, so there were many Kung Fu masters as well in Tibet. Of course, these masters were not up to the caliber when compared to China. But like every empire, they also have their own strengths which they rely on to overcome their enemies. The castle of Tibet was abuzz with activities due to the small victory they had over China. It might not seem like much at first, but the victory meant a lot for the Tibetans. They finally got an overwhelming victory against China, which they considered to be some kind of a wall they must overcome. Then they also got the weapons, which was rumored to be powerful and the main factors that contributed to the unification of China. So it was a great news, deserving a celebration for the emperor, the nobles, and the soldiers. As all the celebration was going on, the main reason why the army of Tibet was able to win in the first place looked at everything from the side. She simply stood at one corner of the room and as if she was carrying an infectious disease, there was no one around her in 10 feet radius. Although the room was quite crowded with the party and celebration, no one approached her. The most she got was a disdainful look or eyes of pity directed at her. She wore a mask and almost every inch of her body was covered in clothes, but if her eyes were to be revealed, they must be sad and lonely. The loneliest place was a room full of people. She had gotten used to it though. At least they were not treating her horribly or constantly go out of their way to bully her anymore. She was an important asset. They may not like her, but they knew she was vital for the strength of this empire. She was the single most important factor for the military of Tibet. At one point, she could no longer bear to stay and she walked out of the celebration hall. Her silver bell strapped on her waist made a soft jiggle sound as she walked through the hall of the castle. The main castle of the Tibet Empire was located at the peak of a mountain, and unlike the Chinese, it was made up of entirely stones and rocks. You could see some similarities between the cultures, but at the same time, they were vastly different. She had lived most of her life in this castle, but it did not feel like home. 2 guards constantly followed her as she walked through the corridors. They were guards assigned to protect her at all times because out of all the animals in the world, she was extraordinarily fragile. She was so weak that any average soldier could easily kill her. So she needed constant security. It was one of the reasons why she was not respected as she should be even though she was the most important person in the Tibet military. Her strength was not her own, she only had the ability to make others strong. She reached her room at last and she walked in swiftly. The guards did not follow her inside and they stood guard beside her door. Now that she was alone in her room, she felt a little at ease and her posture visibly relaxed. Her room was quite large as she spent most of her time there. It was like any other room you would expect from a young snow leopard. But unfortunately, she was not just any snow leopard. May. That was the name her parents had given to her. It directly translates to beautiful. She wondered how they could give her such name when she was anything but. She finally took off her clothes as the baggy fabric fell on the floor. She swiftly discarded all other clothes she wore such as her boots and gloves until finally, she took off her mask. Her true appearance was finally revealed in the isolated room. Her ears twitched and her long tail twirled behind her. These were where her leopard characteristics ended. A beautiful long silver hair flows down like an avalanche from the top of her head to her waist. Yes, it was not a fur but plentiful locks of hair on her head. In fact, there was not a single fur on her body. She only had pale white skin that held no blemishes. Her pale complexion hints that her skin never had much contact with the sun, always having to be hidden under baggy clothes. Instead of paws and claws, she had long dainty fingers and a nice pair of feet at the end of her limbs. Her body was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. Her body was not built to be strong. It had the delicate shape of an hourglass with long legs and unnecessary mounds of flesh on its top and bottom. Her boobs and butt. Indeed, she was not just a leopard. She was also a human. More human than a leopard. She possesses the fragile body of a human girl. Strength was beauty in this world. All animals have bodies that were designed to be exceptionally strong, with each species having more impressive attributes than others. That exceptional design of strength was what made them beautiful. But the human body was fragile and weak. Strength seemed to be the last thing on the creator's mind while making the human body. It was fragile and weak. It had fur, no claws, no fangs, no beak, no hide, no nothing. In a world where strength was beauty, the human body might as well be the ugliest of them all. May's body was the same way. From the shape of her body to the way her muscles were developed, you could tell that she was weak. She had fat on her thighs, chest, and bottom which would undoubtedly hinder her movement. And her skin, they were furless yet they were not scales nor a hide. They were sensitive and soft. She wrapped her tails around her body and wondered why she couldn't just be a complete leopard rather than a human. Humans were looked down upon, not only because they were considered ugly and weak by others but because a human was always associated with slaves. But it's been 20 years, and she has gotten used to it. She flopped down on her bed and stared at the stone ceiling above. She closed her eyes as the fond memory of her father played in her mind. If I am gone in the future, travel north, and you will a place there where you will be accepted just as you are. It will be your home. Go find it. She wondered if what her human father said was true or if it was just a lie he told to reassure her that she would be fine even after he was gone. She wanted to go north and see if what her father said was real or not. But the guards outside her room were not only there to protect her but to also keep her from running away. After all, how could they possibly allow an asset like her to run away? Maybe that was why the stone castle never felt like home to her. Because it was also a prison. Chapter 90, Training in the North. Tai Lung's POV. The icy land of the north was not kind. The icy blankets of snow covered the entire landscape. Mountains were nothing but huge pillars of ice and the sun never shared its warmth. The land was cursed. There was no life in this land for it snuffed out any spark of life in its endless depths of cold. A perpetual blizzard describes the climate of this land, and instead of the cycle of seasons, there was only eternal winter. I have forgotten the sensation of warmth the moment I left the panda village. Yet I was able to traverse such a chilling landscape due to my species. I was designed to live in such a harsh climate, to survive in the unforgiving cold. The frigid bite of the air could not penetrate my fur and I released a thawing breath as I finally reached my destination. Nowhere. It was not a name, I was literally in the middle of nowhere. This is such a bad idea, I said to myself as I looked around, at the endless expanse of white and everything that was not warm. A bad idea, but I couldn't think of any other way to get my training done. The panda village was too nice and relaxing that I could not focus on training. It was nearly the end of my month-long vacation and I had to get my mind ready to face the challenges ahead. The fact that I got a message from Shen which informed me of what happened at the border of Nanzhao also played a factor. A small army of 500 soldiers was able to defeat an army of 3,000 soldiers. It was either the smaller army was exceptionally strong or the bigger army was laughably weak. I have fought against the soldiers of Nanzhao, so I knew it was not the latter. That means the smaller army, the Tibetan soldiers, were exceptionally strong. How strong exactly, I did not know, but I was going to prepare, that's for certain. I did not exactly know how as I have no concrete plan, but what I was doing was the first thing that came to my mind. It was similar to how I would take an ice bath for training my body and to sharpen my mind in my past life. I sat down on the icy plain and crossed my legs. Then I cleared my mind and meditated under the harsh weather of constant snowstorms and numbing blizzards. I meditated. I would have liked to say I cultivated, but there was no such thing. I did not know how long had passed, there was no sun to tell the time. I did mental training, reviewing my past battles and coming up with new ways I could fight. Mental training was one of the most important training. It was said to be superior to physical training at a certain point, and Oogway often favored it over the latter. In such a violent and unwelcoming environment, the chi also felt a little different as I used inner chi to interact with the chi around me. I also tried to come up with solutions to my problem of not having the amount of chi I desired. Storing chi, while it could work, did not suit my taste due to its limitations. Hey. I released a sigh. Then I started using sun breathing as I felt a chill run down my spine. My body heat rose sharply and released a visible vapor. I think that's enough. Mental training and mediation are not really my thing. I learn better with action. Like during a sparring or in the middle of battle, that's when my genius really shone. *vuo*. Flames erupted from my body and challenged the endless expanse of frigid ice. My flames were like hungry beasts as they grew hotter and bigger. The land experiences a rare occasion of hot versus cold. The cold which had reigned over the land for hundreds of years witnessed the birth of searing flames. I felt my fur getting wet as the ice I sat on melts into water. I increased the heat of my flames as they turned blue, and they released a constant force of shockwave that pushed away the melted ice from fooding my place. Let's test a theory of mine, shall we? I said with a wide smile as I inhaled the hot air around me, which further boosts my flames. Can you increase your chi by using everything and allowing it to recover? Basically overexerting it like the muscles. I said and raised my hand. The flames rose too. A weird phenomenon took place where the icy landscape of the north experienced heat for the first time. My fire rose to a frightening degree even while battling with the natural climate and could be seen from miles away. The place turned into a foggy land where water vapor occupied the whole place. A bright blue and yellow dome of heat was visible. I did so until I ran out of chi. Test completed. You can expand your chi, but the result is pathetically weak. This may differ due to age. I suspect that a growing child or teenager would show better results, but for me, it's not worth it. I said as I lay in the middle of nowhere. I passed out after I used up all of my chi and only woke up half a day later. Although my instincts would have protected me from death, it was not wise to use up all your chi like that. Especially when you have no one around you. Considering all of the effort I put in, the result was not worth it. For comparison, if my chi was 1 million, after exhaustion my chi and recovery, it increased by 0.1. If I was not extremely acute with my chi, it would have been impossible to tell the difference, so it's official that trying to increase my chi like this was useless. Test number 2. I said with a smile. There are a few days left until I finally have to start conquering the world. During that time, I must put my mind back to training and become ready to take on the world. I will find a way eventually. After all, I am Tai Lung. Chapter 91, Training with Furious 5. Third POV. The month of Tai Lung's vacation had come to an end. Along with him, the Furious 5 and Po himself would have to leave the Panda Village. It was just a simple vacation. Each one of them had a duty of their own, duty as the Supreme General of China, duty as the disciples of the Jade Palace, and duty as the Dragon Warrior. They couldn't stay in the Panda Village forever and have an eternal slow life. Everyone, especially Po, was having a difficult time saying goodbye. In the end, on the proposition of Li Shan, Po's father, many villagers decided to follow Tai Lung and the rest back to the Valley of Peace. They had not seen the outside world in a long time, so they thought it was a good idea to go out for a while. After all, Lord Shen was no longer looking for them, and Tai Lung gave his words that they would always be protected and would even get an official apology from Shen. The pandas were not ones to hold grudges. They were in a way, just like Po, peaceful and forgiving. Yet they deserved all the apologies in the world for what happened to them. So they all returned to the Valley of Peace. It took them much longer than Tai Lung expected, as the panda were not built for speed, but he did not mind and enjoyed the slow journey as his final rest. The village of the Jade Palace welcomed all of the pandas, and on the command of Tai Lung, they were also ordered to get more provisions from other trading towns. The village became quite lively due to the new guests. A few days later, their bodies moved at a speed beyond what they thought they were capable of. Their attacks held a weight unlike they had ever held. Their minds worked in sync, instincts took control as thoughts were deemed too slow. Their techniques, which they have practiced 1,000 times, reached a level of excellence they thought they would achieve only after 20 more years of practice. Their full potential came out due to necessity. Their current selves were not worthy, so they surpassed their natural limit. At that moment, they became someone from 20 years ahead. All of this, just so they could keep up with him. Maybe catch the end of his tail. Maybe exchange a single blow on equal strengths. Maybe move as well as he did, have techniques half perfect as his. Not bad, Tai Lung said with a smile as he dodged the full onslaught of the Furious 5. His movements were like the finest silk, tiny fabrics stitched together to form something more, a greater picture. One the Furious 5 could not even behold yet. Tai Lung raised his hand and caught Tigress's punch, which held all of her strength behind it. The stone platform on which they fought cracked like glass. A shockwave spread out and created a wave of dust. In that same breath, he tilted his head to dodge Manits, who blitzed at him at the speed of a bullet. He stepped on Monkey's staff so that he was stuck, and then his tail tangled with Viper's body, leaving her immobile. Not bad at all, he said with an impressed smile. Don't forget about me. Crane screamed as his body dived towards Tai Lung. His eyes narrowed and he tucked his wings to imitate a certain technique which Tai Lung had told them about. Tai Lung looked up and with not a single change in expression, he blew at Crane. His chi came alive and commanded the surrounding air as the small gust of wind turned into a violent vortex that completely threw Crane off his trajectory. He crash-landed on the stone platform. As I was saying, you all have improved much in a short amount of time. Tai Lung praised and he released them. The Furious Five leapt back and created distance. Their breaths were ragged and tired. They clutched the part of their body which was bruised and throbbing. Tai Lung was not the most gentle instructor. If it was not lethal, he would not hesitate to give you any injury. In his words, the body learns best through pain, and the mind through trauma. I am proud of you all. A few words strung together, but it was enough to put a smile on their faces. He acknowledged them. Hearing him say that, they thought all the efforts and all the pain were absolutely worth it. They fell on their back and looked at the sky with accomplished hearts. You say that but... Tigress started but had to gasp for air mid-sentence. It seems like we are losing to you worse than our first fight. Tai Lung revealed a small smile. It was true that they were making progress but he was making even more. If they were growing at an impressive speed, his growth in strength was monstrous. You don't reach the peak of Mount Tai after 1,000 steps. Tai Lung said in his wise master tone, you merely realized just how high Mount Tai was. Monkey laughed, and so did Mantis. That's funny. Mount Tai. Tai Lung turned his head towards the training hall and called out, Po, it's time to do your job. Coming. Came a faraway reply from inside the hall. Po ran out from the hall soon enough as he quickly stumbled down the steps. Climbing down some, but falling down more. By the time he reached the tournament platform, he was also as tired as the Furious Five. Tai Lung watched all this with an amused smile. Adrenaline really was more vital for the panda than others. While he could keep up when fighting, he has the endurance of virgin during sex the rest of the day. Okay, come around guys. Po said and all of the Furious Five gathered around him. After all of them gathered around, Po closed his eyes in concentration. Then he put his hand forward, and a soft golden glow followed as his palm lit up. His chi floods out like an uncontrolled dam in the form of golden light. His chi seeped inside their bruised body and their bodies used the energy to repair themselves quickly. Tai Lung also focused carefully on the display. Specifically, he was trying to see the depth of Po's chi but it remained infinite. That brought a strange smile to Tai Lung's face. He had to find a way to get challenged that much chi soon. What Po was doing was the basic utilization of chi. He learned to use chi on the last day of the village as he was saying goodbye to his family. It was a rather emotional event where Po had to choose if he was a panda and should stay in the village or if he was the dragon warrior and he should return to the Jade Palace. In the end, he found out who he was. As he said it, I am everything. Tai Lung was happy for the young prodigy blessed by the heavens. But it was also a new challenge to him. Now that Po could tap into his infinite chi, he was a genuine rival of Tai Lung. Although Po can only use it to transfer his chi to others so that they may heal, he could not do any other things yet. Maybe it was due to being a panda, who healed even Oogway, or maybe the nature of his chi, but he was a great healer. With his infinite chi, he was literally unlimited Caesar beans. One thing you should note is that healing through chi healed everything, even your mental health, as it is literally the transfer of vitality. I suspect that it could even heal diseases and maybe increase lifespan. Okay, done. Po said and wiped the sweat on his forehead. Then he turned towards Tai Lung. His eyes asked if Tai Lung wanted to be healed too. Tai Lung shook his head. Okay Po, return to the training hall and practice on your chi again with Master Shifu. Tai Lung said. That was why he was not included in the training. Tai Lung wants him to focus on his chi more than any other training. Po nodded and wishing luck to his friends, he went back to the training hall. The Furious Five got up and nervously looked at Tai Lung. Okay, we do it again, he said and shot towards Tigress before punching her hard enough to completely send her flying off the platform. Never let your guard down. Infinite chi equals infinite healing. And infinite healing equals infinite training dummy. He only got a few days left so Tai Lung made the most of it. Chapter 92, An Eye for an Eye. Third POV. In the Valley of Peace, the sound of the morning bell could be heard echoing through the mountains and the village. It was a sound that signifies the start of a new day, the beginning of tomorrow. The sun had begun its ascent from the east and the peak of the mountains were already lit up in golden warmth. Yet the rest of the valley was still blanketed by shadows, patiently waiting for the sun to share its warmth. This will be goodbye for a while, Tai Lung said with his signature smirk as he stared down at the stairs leading down from the Jade Palace to the village. His duty of acting as a line of defense in the borders would take him quite a bit of his time, at least until China had fully united and ready to face the rest of the world. Until then, he will act as a second Great Wall of China. His main priority would be stopping any invasion and protecting the whole of China while it undergoes its vulnerable transformation. I suppose it is, Shifu said, standing beside him while the rest of the disciples were at the back. They had gathered to bid farewell to Tai Lung as he would leave his home again. Will you be fine? Shifu asked and gave a side eye at Tai Lung, who scoffed. You are asking the wrong question. You should ask if they will be okay, Tai Lung said. And by they he meant anyone who would stand in his way, be it the Tibetan or the Guptas. I shall pray for the world then, Shifu said and earned a chuckle from Tai Lung. Try not to die of old age while I am away, Tai Lung said as Shifu acted offended. I will do no such thing until I see with my own eyes, little Tai Lungs, Shifu said with a laugh. Then you'll be alive for a while. Bah, why are you acting like a youngster? Know your age, my son. You are already past 40, Shifu said. Considering the many species which have shorter lifespans, 40 years could be said to be quite old. Though Tai Lung was still physically 20, his years spent in prison could only considered being in a coma. But the joke still prevails, he was an old cat. That just means I will end up like you. That's good, no? Like father like son. Tai Lung said, much to the Shifu's annoyance. Who was he to make fun of his son when he can't even have a girlfriend himself? Maybe it's time he himself looks for such things. Go along your way now. We don't want to keep Emperor Shen waiting. Oh, and say hello to that bird for me too, and tell him to quickly make the road leading to the Jade Palace wider and better, Shifu said, bidding his final farewell to his son. Well, considering what he caused after his first time leaving the Jade Palace, he was sure that this one would be full of events again. Shifu will keep an ear for it. Tai Lung waved at the furious five and Po standing behind him, and he shot towards the sky, flying west to Gongmen City. The journey continues. The tale of the Supreme General of China was just starting. His next conquest will carve his name not only in the history of China but the world. Tai Lung will forever be remembered. Tai Lung's POV. I did not bother using the stairs as I flew directly above the Tower of Sacred Flames. And just like I did when I first had my talk with Shen, I directly fell on the roof of the tower. My body with its momentum easily broke through the roof as I crashed into the tower. Then I landed directly on the floor of the throne room with a loud thud. Asterisk boom, asterisk. The soldiers stationed around the throne room immediately sprung into action, but the moment the dust was cleared and my image was revealed, they put down their weapons and bowed to me. Can't you take the front door? Shen asked me from his throne. Why would I do such things when I can fly? I asked and dusted myself off of the derbies. Then I walked towards the throne with a confident stride. Now let me ask you, why did the person I thought to be the smartest animal in China lose 3,000 soldiers and surrendered our secret arms to the enemy? I asked, and Shen got up from his throne to walk down. So that we can be on an equal level. The servants were quick to set up a table on which we could both sit and have our talk. We sat on the floor and we helped fix the table on which tea and other things were served. An overworked mind and arrogance would get you such results, Shen said, making no excuse on his monumental failure. It's quite shameful, honestly. More shameful than the fact that you are a bird yet you can't fly. I asked as the servants served us tea. I can fly, Shen. Using a kung fu technique, yes, I added. Let us not indulge in useless chatter and focus on the important points here. We have much to discuss before you leave, Shen said. Oh, then let me start with a question, I said and looked at him. Does your mistake mean we have to worry about cannons from the enemy? Absolutely not. They stole 12 cannons from the western walls and 24 barrels of gunpowder. Yet they have no ability to recreate them, especially not gunpowder. That technology is still 100 years away from their grasp. Shen said. Good to hear. Although I have no problem dealing with the cannons myself, it would be disastrous for our soldiers. That would mean we created a higher form of war causing more death and cold violence, I said while sipping my tea. China tea was always good. Speaking of soldiers, how much would you need with you? Shen asked. None. They will just slow me down at that point. All of you just focus on unifying the last 4 kingdoms. The question is, how long will it take you? The majority of the kingdom of Wu is already under us in the span of 1 month. I suppose it will take us another half a year to a full year to fully unite them without civil violence. But if we were to force our way and march towards their capital, it would take only a couple of months. The latter would leave much civil distress though, which will cause us bothersome issues after the unification. That's a long time considering how we untied the 6 kingdoms in such a short time, I said. They are cautious and careful now, and our momentum had slowed down. Plus this is considering we don't have you to lead the armies, Shen said. I hummed as I processed his words. Half a year, huh? He would have returned by then. Hi. My last prophecy. It seems before I could even conquer the world, the destined battle will happen. Or else his presence alone will change everything for me and my plans. Amongst the many enemies I had, he was the one I feared the most. Yes, I genuinely was afraid of him. Not because of cowardice but because I know full well what he was capable of. If he was allowed room to grow after his escape, it could turn out bad for me. He has enough strength to fulfill the prophecy. Speaking of prophecy, where is Soothsayer? Has she looked into the future recently? Didn't she foresee the situation with Tibet? I asked and Shen sighed. I have asked her, of course. But she is having trouble looking into the future like she used to do in the past. She said the reason was because of us. We have already strayed from our future and destiny. Shen said, I take it as our victory. After that, a discussion followed and lasted until noon. We were the rulers of China, and although I had more power over the military, and he the politics, Shen continued to inform me of the actions he was taking to reform China. From his idea of appointing local administration in every village and creating new noble families and a new class of citizens, he shared everything with me. He was also focusing more on the iron and ore industry of China for the upcoming war we were about to wage against the world. By the end of the discussion, I have a final question to ask him. You said there were Tibetan armies stationed near the border. I asked, where are they exactly? Shen raised an eyebrow and scanned me for a few moments before he smiled and opened up a map. Here is our border, Shen said and pointed at the lines on the map, and our scouts have found out that they are caping here. He trailed, to way over here. He stabbed his steel feather at the location of the place where the Tibetans were camping. They should be around a few thousand. he said with a smile that suggests that it would be easy work for me. I take it you know my intention. Yes, I am thinking exactly what you are thinking. Then consider the broder protected and the invasions interrupted. I will be leaving now, I said and stood up. I did not turn back as I made a beeline to the balcony of the tower. I have some debt to pay. The next second I was gone. To pay back the debt owed while I was away. An eye for an eye. Let's send them a message. Chapter 93, The Gupta Empire. Third POV. India. The Gupta Empire. It was undoubtedly the most powerful empire that existed on the face of the earth. Its only rival, which was China, fragmented into different kingdoms. Therefore the Gupta Empire could be said to be the sole superpower of the world. The Gupta Empire was founded way back in the 300 AD and it has remained supreme ever since. They dominated almost every trade in the world, but although they had such influence and powerful armies, they remained content in their Indian subcontinent. Other than trade or business, they never opened much to the outside world. They have no interest in taking over land or expanding their territory. The Gupta Empire was like an empire from a different planet, content to not be disturbed or to disturb. But fate had other plans for this superpower empire. One of the rulers of the Gupta Empire, Samudragupta, was an ambitious ruler who aspired to expand the empire and conquer the world for himself. While the other rulers and the emperor, Chandragupta, had no interest in such things, the young Gupta ruler wanted all the glory in the world. And as if the stars had aligned, he got a message from the Tsampo of Tibet about the vulnerable state China was in. He offered an alliance to take the land of China while it was going through a civil war. The Gupta Empire had the military might needed while Tibet was in the perfect geological location to attack. With their combined effort, taking over China should be easy. That's what the Emperor of Tibet promised Samudragupta. But he was not stupid. Although he aspired to conquer the world, he wanted to do so after convincing the emperor and his fellow rulers. The Gupta Empire was separated into 4 regions, the north, east, south, and west. Each region had one ruler referred to as Rajas, and then there was the supreme emperor, Chandragupta. Although Samudragupta ruled the north and had absolute control over the military, he was not easily tempted. So he declined the invitation for an alliance from the Tibetan emperor. But today, a new messenger arrived and he had brought something which had caught Samudragupta's interest. So, what is this called again? Samudragupta asked. His deep and powerful voice echoed through the gigantic castle. The castle was made of stone and was crafted by the finest artisans. It was a show of Indian superior architecture which was centuries ahead of its time. But even in that gigantic castle, sitting on a giant throne made of rocks and soft cushions with many fruits by the side, his huge stature eclipsed everything. It made the giant castle appear not so big. A steppe mammoth. That was the species of the great Raja, Samudragupta. They are called cannons, my lord. They spit out fire and metal and could destroy stone walls with ease. The convoy of the Tibetan Empire said. Huh. Samudragupta huffed, and you claim that this thing is dangerous for us. The Tibetan convoy gulped. He was but an antelope standing in front of the largest elephant in the world. He felt like prey. He felt like going home. He choked due to the sheer pressure Samudragupta was putting on him with but his stare. He grabbed his long powerful tusks and waited for a reply. Yes, my lord. The Chinese are manufacturing these weapons and many others in bulk. The new Emperor Shen wishes to conquer the world and will soon be coming after all of us when the civil war ends, the antelope said. Samudragupta hummed and looked at the weapon carefully. He wondered how such a small metal could be dangerous to them, to the point that the Emperor of Tibet was proposing an alliance and that they wage war against China quickly before they were ready. Were they being underestimated, or is the threat of China true? Show me then, Samudragupta said. Show me what that thing could do. Pardon, your highness. The antelope asked in confusion. Make it spit fire and metal at me, Samudragupta said as he laid sideways on the throne. It was a rather lazy posture for a king, but who the hell was going to reprimand him? I am sorry, my lord. But like I said, the antelope was going to continue, but then he froze. The elephant guard around tensed and were ready to crack his head for the disrespect. To not follow the word of the Raja at once was unacceptable. Samudragupta himself was carefully staring at him. One wrong move and the poor antelope would die. I don't care what you said, but you shall do as I say, Samudragupta said. Okay, my lord. The antelope said in nervousness as the soldiers he brought with him immediately got to work. They pushed the cannon and aimed it at the Raja, Samudragupta, who was lying on his throne. They aimed carefully as the heavy metallic object made a creaking sound in the silence of the castle. After they finished aiming, the antelope quickly light up the fuse and shot the cannon. Asterisk boom, asterisk. The recoil sent the soldiers flying away as the cannon spit out fire and then metal. A red streak flew through the castle and headed straight to Samudragupta like a meteorite. Asterisk boom, asterisk. Another explosion shook the castle as everyone held their ears due to the sound. A shockwave so violent pushed everyone 2 steps back. The castle was not big enough to house the cannon as its thunderous roar had a lasting effect. After that violent outburst, silence prevailed. Asterisk bong, asterisk. The next thing was the sound of metal hitting the ground. Cold and void. The convoy of Tibet watched in horror as Samudragupta remained in his place, in the exact same position as if he had not received a direct shot by a full cannon. The cannonball simply crashed against his powerful chest and after losing its force, it fell on the ground like a useless rock. Samudragupta hummed. I see. This can definitely kill a normal soldier of ours. he said and touched the place where the cannon landed. It stings a little. How many of these does China have again? Countless of them, my lord. And they are only creating more, and we have heard from our spies that they are also making new and better weapons. The antelope said. Danger. Samudragupta had concluded that China could indeed be dangerous. Of course, they won't defeat the empire, but the Chinese would be able to do some damage with such powerful weapons. And if the new Emperor Shen truly wanted to conquer the world, it will definitely come after China, which was known as the Golden Goose of the WOD. Not only that, Lord Shen has Tai Lung by his side. The antelope said, the strongest warrior in the world. Samudragupta scoffed. Was that also supposed to be dangerous? The strongest warrior in the world. Well, he had never seen this Tai Lung in India. And India, the Gudap Empire, was stronger than the world itself. He had heard about this warrior of China, the Supreme General, they call him, but he was nothing informed of the might of the empire. Okay then, send back a message to your king, Samudragupta said and picked up the cannonball. He stood up and walked towards one of the windows of the castle. Samudragupta and his kingdom of the north are interested in this invasion of China, he said and pulled his arm back. Then he threw the cannonball outside with a force that far surpassed the cannon. Chapter 94, The Great Reminder. Third POV. Tibet was an empire located on top of northern India and at the bottom of western China. Its geographical location made it so that the empire was like a bridge between China and India. The Tibetan Empire was a dynasty that reigned for countless years, but the size its territory barely expanded due to its powerful neighbors, China and India. The size of the Tibetan Empire was around 3 great kingdoms of China combined. The emperor of Tibet was known as the Tsanpo, and they have the heritage of the great Chiro species, the Tibetan antelope. This species, the royal family, had ruled over Tibet for many generations. There were also 4 great noble clans in Tibet. They were the Gar clan, the Sumpa clan, Njam's clan, and finally Mayang clan. They were given territories in the empire and held many nobility titles according to their merit. They were often appointed as governors of cities or as military commanders and officials. Other than the noble clans, there was the Council of Ministers, which were directly appointed by the emperor based purely on merit. They helped the emperor in administrating his kingdom. At the moment, the clan heads of the 4 noble houses and almost all of the ministers had gathered in its Siglok Han/meeting hall as ordered by the king. The military commanders and officials were also present in the hall, along with May. The hall was abuzz with activity as the emperor had not arrived yet. The people were discussing what the meeting would be about and what was so important that so many important people had to be gathered. May observing from the corner like usual. She wore her full clothes, so none of her features other than tails and ears were visible, but if you could see her face, she would have looked bored. No one wanted to talk to her or be close to her, yet they did not want to offend her either because of her capabilities, which created this awkward air between her and the rest of the Titan officials. She was really tired of all these schemes. Just then, the door of the meeting hall was pushed open violently as the emperor, a Tibetan antelope, strode in with the confidence of a lion. He had on his face the most content smile, which also begged for praise. The emperor made his way to the throne, and after he sat on it, everyone except May bowed down in respect. All hail the emperor. Long live Tsanpo. The emperor raised a hand and the different animals in the hall stopped bowing and looked up with their lord's permission. Rejoice, my loyal subjects. I, your wise and wonderful king, have managed to secure the alliance with the northern kingdom of the Gupta Empire for the invasion of China, the emperor declared, and he unfurled a scroll which was the official writing of the alliance. Everyone released a gasp of shock as they flocked around the scroll for proof that it was real. The king had an arrogant smirk on his face as he showed off the official scroll. Even Mi's ears perked up in interest at the news. How could they not be surprised? A relationship between countries took years to develop. To accomplish an alliance in the short span of 2 months was nothing but extraordinary. It shows a certain level of intelligence held by their emperor. The reason why he ordered his soldiers to steal the weapons of China was not because he feared them or because he wanted to recreate them. His main aim had always been to make China the common enemy of both India and Tibet. That was the easiest and quickest way to get an alliance. It took almost 5 minutes for the people to take a look at the scroll and finally digest the shocking news. The northern kingdom of India, ruled by Samudragupta, had now allied with Tibet. Settle down now, settle down, the emperor said, and things were done in his words. Although I have secured the alliance and managed to convince the Gupta Empire to send their troops through our territory to China, that is not the end of it, the emperor said. It is still our war even now that the Gupta had been involved. We have always been aiming to take the land of China, which has always been ours since our ancestors. So we cannot leave things to the Gupta Empire. We will also fight along with them. In fact, they are just helpers. We would have done it with or without them. That is why I have gathered you here. The emperor paused and everyone listened. To plan for the invasion of China, we have sent many spies across the border through the trading routes. Our spies had even settled in China, have their own family, and a complicated spy network have been set up. China cannot make a move without us knowing. And right now, they are still busy fighting amongst themselves in the east and the north. Each and every one of you will be important in the upcoming war. The agriculture minister will have to work on producing more harvest for the provisions of the army. The minister of gold and mining will have to produce a lot more iron and steel, and likewise, the minister of city affairs will have to inform our citizens of the upcoming war and collect appropriate war taxes. The Emperor continued his speech on how each and everyone would have to work together for the war ahead. It would take a lot of effort, but the result would be worth it. Not only will they enjoy it, it will be for the next generation to enjoy. The rich lands of China will be theirs again. Mei, my dear. The Emperor suddenly addressed Mei, who perked up when her name was called. That was odd. Rarely was she ever addressed in a time like this, and because she also had no interest, she usually stayed quiet. You will be vital for every operation going forth. The Emperor said, your gift will be used to not only strengthen our army but the Guptas as well. You will also have to help in the farming. You will be quite busy from here on out. So can I entrust this duty to you? Will you work and sacrifice for your home? The Emperor asked. If she was not wearing a mask, she would have vomited it. Actually, she gagged a few times at how he was buttering her up when they needed her, but the Emperor took that as her nodding. Is this what our slicking the guards talked about feel? Very well then. On this day, I shall grant you the nobility. Make your empire proud. The Emperor said, causing a small ruckus in the hall. Empty titles, hollow promises. She hated it all, but it wouldn't do her harm to participate in the war. Actually, this could be a great time to travel north and search for the home that her father had told her about. The place where she will be accepted. Okay then. Now let's start with the logistics. Advisors. The Emperor called, but then the giant door of the hall was swung open, interrupting him. Who is it? The Emperor asked, upset to be disturbed. My lord, my lord. A soldier ran inside with hurried steps. His eyes were shaking and you could tell from his body language that he was clearly panicked. It is about our army stationed near the western borders of China. They are all gone. That day, in that meeting hall where the Emperor spoke as a victor, they were reminded of why they had not been able to take over even the tiniest land of China through the passing centuries. The person who stopped their invasion single-handedly 20 years ago was still alive. It was a reminder of the obstacles they had to overcome, with or without the help of the Guptas. It was the day a debt was paid and a message was sent. The Supreme General of China had come to pay a visit. Tai Lung was in Tibet. The ignored truth was hammered down in their heart. They had challenged the strongest warrior in the world. Chapter 95, Darkness for Those Who Deserve It. Tai Lung's POV. I am not a good person. And I am not a hero. I have trained and dedicated 20 years of my life, trying to be a hero, trying to be the savior of the world everyone admired. Yet I failed spectacularly in the end. That experience told me that I could never be someone I was not. I am not a hero, never was, and never will be. So does that make me a bad person? Is my failure to be the hero proof that I was a villain? No, I am not the villain either. Maybe I was meant to be, but I was not. Never was, and never will be. So what am I? If I was not the hero or the villain, what am I? You will only understand who I really am when you realize the world is not only black and white or good and bad. I am Tai Lung. You might claim that that didn't really mean anything. It was too broad and narrow at the same time. What does it even mean? It does not define anything, which is exactly the point. I am not defined by anything other than myself. I do not have any definition to chain me down to a single meaning or purpose. I am free. I am everything you behold. I am Tai Lung. So as I floated above the army camp of the Tibetan Empire and made the decision to erase them from the world, I did not feel remorse. I was about to rob the world and its people of their lover, brother, husband, friend, and maybe even their son. Yet I was not burdened by hesitance. I see darkness in his heart. That was what Oogway told my father when he proposed to me to become the dragon warrior. For the longest time, I despised him for that statement, but as I grew older and wiser, I realized that he was not wrong. He was not completely right either, but he was not wrong. I do have darkness in my heart. A sickening darkness which I unleashed on anyone I deemed deserved it. It was a side of me that the people who insisted on becoming my enemy would have to face. My ears twitched as I carefully listened to what was happening inside the army camp 1,000 feet below me. I have been floating above the army camp for a long time now, from the time when the sun was high in the sky to now, when the sun was getting swallowed by the horizon. I listened closely, making sure that the camp was only filled with willing and able soldiers and no one else. This was exactly the case for the new camp, which had not gone through a battle. They did not realize their end was looming above them. I killed all the bird scouts stationed in the air in silence, and I have remained unnoticed ever since. Then as the sun was about to set and I made sure that there were no civilians close by, I started the attack that would end all of their fate. I connected the palms of both my hands and I started gathering a huge portion of my chi there. It was not a quick process as I spent quite a while gathering my chi. I focused all of the chi on one palm of my hand, compressed it and then repeated the process. My imagination directs my chi. My unyielding will becomes the crutch as I mold a miracle onto the world. Reality became a helpless witness, a victim of a phenomenon that should not exist. One thing I found out recently about chi was that a great visualization, will and intent go a long way to enhancing my attacks. Such was the case for Kamehameha, which left a deep mark in my heart since I was a child. So my visualization, desire, and everything was to the maximum. It was a similar case for the current situation as I visualized something which left a great impression on me the first time I saw it. It helped in shaping the miracle and gave me a boost. I willed out almost the entirety of my chi reserves as I planned to finish everything with one attack. And then a few minutes later, I was ready. I opened my eyes as they glowed in a brilliant yellow hue in the darkening sky. I brought my hands up ever so slowly and my muscles shook as if I was lifting the heaviest object known to life. Then I brought my hand down like a judge slamming his palm on the courtroom table with an order, a judgment of death. Buddha's palm. The space flickered and disregarding the fundamental laws of the universe, a devastating force slammed onto the earth. A phenomenon that should not have happened, it was an action without any logical base, a miracle. The clouds parted due to the invisible force and the earth was left to be traumatized and forever be reshaped. The invisible force slammed onto the earth and crushed the Tibetan army. Everything was flattened in an instant. The soldiers had trained all their lives, hoping to protect themselves and the people they love. But in front of my overwhelming strength, they did not have time to even fight back. They did not have the privilege to fight for their lives. In the end, what was the difference between themselves and the civilians who had never trained or experienced hardship in their life? Because they died just as helpless. The catastrophic impact left a deep handprint on the earth. It was more than a kilometer wide and many times longer. Then it was followed by a deafening sound that shook the whole world. Asterisk boom. Asterisk I remained in the sky as I watched the shockwave spread through the surroundings like a nuclear bomb dropped on the ocean. Mountains crumbled and nature was literally rearranged. I watched until everything settled down and the world stilled. Not happy with my work yet not ashamed. Then I left without a single word. This was the darkness Oagwe saw. Chapter 96, Reactions? Third POV. What do you mean our soldiers are gone? The Emperor of Tibet asked in the silence of the meeting hall. It is as I said, my lord. The soldier said, they are all gone. We could not find even a single corpse. They have been wiped out from the face of the earth. What? How is that possible? The Emperor yelled and stood up. The people inside the meeting hall murmured in discussion. It was news which was hard to swallow for everyone. We have the picture of what our army had become. It was drawn by one of the bird artisans. The soldier said and pulled out a scroll which he quickly presented to the emperor. The Tibetan antelope unfurled the scroll and he was immediately confused. What is this? A handmark. That was the place where the army was camping, my lord. The soldier said with a gulp. If you look closely. The emperor finally saw the small hills and broken trees on the side of the landmark. It was then that the image finally clicked in his mind and he realized what might have been the fate of his soldiers. Impossible. The emperor muttered in an odd mixture of disbelief and awe, a tone used when one comes face to face with a god. This handmark. The emperor said and observed the picture closer. The handmark had callous and the shape looked like the hand of a tiger or leopard. It's Tai Lung. The soldier said. We have confirmed it with our spies as well. We had no time to react because Tai Lung attacked the same day he was sent to the borders to protect it. The emperor put down the scroll and the nobles nearby picked it up to gaze at the image too. They passed it around from one after the other. All of their eyes widened in horror or squinted in an odd understanding. A realization struck the hearts of everyone as they finally realized who they had plotted against. China and the strongest warrior in the world. They now felt the full weight of that title. A few other aliases Tai Lung had been called also came into their mind, the 11th power, the walking kingdom, etc. To crush an army of thousands with one hand was something that took time for everyone to fully comprehend. It's fine. The emperor said. His eyes gained the determined light of someone who had far gone insane. A diluted version of Shen's insanity. We have the Guptas with us now. They have warriors who can take on Tai Lung. The emperor said. Although the feat of crushing an entire army with one hand was impressive, the emperor who was well versed in Qi knew that there had to be some trick to it. Tai Lung could not just throw out such catastrophic attacks like that casually. If he did, he wouldn't have needed an army behind him to conquer the world. Yet he was the supreme general. And Tai Lung won't be as strong as he actually is when faced with them. On the other hand, their warriors would be stronger than they actually are. They have a secret weapon of their own. One that could change the tide of wars. He will not yield. Tibet will not cower when faced with Tai Lung. Tai Lung had been put between us and China again. But this time, he won't be able to stop us. The emperor said. This time, he had the Gudas and the priestess of infinity. Tibet got the message. And they are not afraid. Gongmen City, China. Ha 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 ha. A crazed laugh that spoke of many unhinged things echoed through the tower of sacred flames. Shen, the white peacock, was laughing with his neck rolling back as he held onto the scroll in his wings. It was the same information the Tibetan emperor got. But unlike the antelope, Shen was laughing out of happiness and joy. He felt like someone who had won the biggest lottery in the world for allying with Tai Lung early on. The heavens presented the greatest opportunity and his genius took it. He realized he had been talking a lot about trying harder and making sure that he stood on par with Tai Lung and his great achievements. But did he even need to? Can they even lose? He didn't think so. Shen's laughter died down and he gazed upon the scroll again, specifically at the huge handprint which traumatized the earth. He really wanted to see the horror on the Tibetans' faces when they saw this. It must have been a glorious sight. Would you all take a look at what your general did? Shen said and showed the scroll to the guards and Boss Wolf nearby. I want this information to be spread throughout China. I want every animal and every little child to be aware of this event. People should be talking about the greatness of their general in every household by the end of this week. From the city to even the most isolated village. Shen gave his order. Spread flyers, sing praises of his might and create poems. Let the people who had been afraid of the looming threat of the other empires find peace in their rulers' strength. Shen said. There was a lot of upset in China when the news of 3,000 soldiers dying at the hands of 500 Tibetan soldiers spread throughout China. They were questioning their safety since China was in such a vulnerable state. But now, all those fears would be chased away. Instill a sense of invincibility amongst the people. Make them feel good about being part of united China, to be under Tai Lung. Shen said, this will quench people's uncertainty. Was it better under the new rule or before, when they were split into kingdoms? Now that the people had lost their kingdoms and individual pride in their ethnicity, they needed something else to be proud of. And sow fear into the heart of those who oppose us, Shen added with a hiss. Make them feel like they have gone against gods. With the end of the order, the subjects of Shen immediately got to work. Propaganda was just one of the many tools of a ruler, the city of Texelite, Gupta Empire. Samudragupta looked at the piece of paper in his hand and hummed to himself. Everyone in the throne room was silent, actively observing their ruler's reaction to the news they considered shocking. How would he react? Interesting. Samudragupta said and rubbed his powerful tusks that looked grander than any sphere could ever look. So China got another Oogway right after his death. Samudragupta said. Oogway was well known in China because he had actually led an army against them, and even after the war, Oogway traveled through India learning much from them. So they were aware of what the turtle could do. Now, Samudragupta felt that Tai Lung would be the same way. It almost felt like history was repeating itself. So not only do they have those weapons, but Tai Lung is leading them. He hummed again and changed his position on the throne. Now this show of power changed his whole attitude. And maybe not for the best for Tai Lung and China. Call the messenger. I wish to send a message to the emperor. Smadragupta said and discarded the piece of paper. And now it begins. Chapter 97, to the city of Tibet. Tai Lung's POV. That took a lot out of me, I said as a dry laugh escaped my throat. More than I thought it would. I looked at my hand and wondered when I would be able to throw those kind of attack like normal punches. It might sound crazy, but I was determined to make it happen one day. A day where I would be able to crush mountains with but one gesture of my hand. I didn't care if the world was not strong enough for such powers. It should have never given a reality-bending energy to me in the first place. I walked through the plains of the Tibetan Empire, surveying the whole area and landscape so that I could have a mental map of the land in my mind. I made sure to remember where there were mountains, rough terrains that would be difficult for a huge army to traverse, lakes and ponds which could act as a source of water, and all other important things. Only an incompetent warrior would remain uncertain of his environment, and a general who lacked awareness of his surroundings would be even more disastrous. It was also why I was walking instead of flying and looking down at the landscape. I want to feel how it felt to walk in the terrain, how far the soldiers can see on foot, and so on. It had been a day since I wiped out the army camping too close to our border, and even if I was not aware of what was happening, I knew I most likely caused a stir amongst everyone. Which was exactly what I was trying to achieve with that costly move. Even after a day, I had not fully recovered all of the chi I had used on that single power move. Which just goes to show the urgency at which I need to find ways to have more chi. It's like I had been upgrading my weapons, but I lacked the necessary ammo to use them. Such things could not remain unchanged. I needed to achieve the impossible and expand my chi. I had been trying to lower how much chi each attack took by refining my control, but such things could go only so far. I hoped my tall tasks of defending China from every invader would work as an enlightenment. Something that would push me to my limits and bring out my true potential. Because that's how most warriors get stronger. Not because of the desire for rewards, but due to the heavy consequences of failure. This will do, I said as I closed my mind and tried to recollect the nature of my surroundings. I nodded when I could recall vividly how the landscape was. I was done. Then I leapt into the sky and flew towards the border. I did not actually reach the defensive walls on our border though, as I stopped somewhere farther. I was still inside the Tibetan territory, but I decided that this would be the place where I would stay. There were still a few soldiers stationed on the walls, so I would have them as a quick means of support while they would still be far enough so that I did not need to care for their safety in battle. When you reach a certain level of power, a small amount of soldiers become a bother rather than help. This was evident in my fight with Mighty Eagle, where I had to constantly be aware of their safety and make sure he targets only me. I continued floating in the air for some time until an idea popped into my mind. I put my hands together and tucked them under my side as if I were carrying an invisible ball. Then I started gathering my chi as white chi and blue chi started coming out of my palm. Then I charged up the attack until it turned into a light blue ball of pure chi. Kamehameha, I called, and then a beam of energy burst forth like a laser. The beam hit the ground as I made a line on the plains. The beam was powerful enough that it made a straight line even on the horizon that I could not see. After a few seconds, I stopped and took a breath. There, much better, I said with a smirk. Then I flew down and stood before the new line on the ground. It was quite deep and the heat made some lava on the ground. I shall prevent any soldiers or army from crossing this new line that I made. So I sat down on the ground and waited in silence. I closed my eyes and meditated. Then I became something akin to a great wall of China, one that would protect it from any invaders. I was an immovable object. No one shall pass me. The next day. Okay, maybe being a wall is not really my thing, I said as I looked at the great city of Tibet ahead. I realized soon enough that it was extremely boring and sad to just sit there and wait for an attack to happen. Not only that, it was stupid as well. Letting them gather all their forces and attack me with everything I had and just expect myself to stop it in time? That sounds beyond dumb. so I decided to visit the closest city of Tibet. I did not settle for the simple villages even close by, as I wanted to see just how the cities differ from China. Cities were the best indicator or a country's wealth. And if I stayed in close to the enemy, it meant that I could keep an eye on them and maybe sabotage them if an attack was going to happen. Which is way smarter than just sitting near the border like a rock and waiting for an invasion. It's more impressive than I thought, I commented as I looked at the great walls of the city and the well-maintained roads leading to it. But if I wanted to enter, I would need a disguise, as my fame was spread throughout the world. There were many pictures and stories of me spread everywhere. I hummed and looked around as I hid behind a tree, observing the many people traveling on the road. And when I finally saw a fellow feline who was about my size wearing clothes which greatly covered his face, I made a move. He was also alone without a companion, so I chose him as my victim. Asterisk swoosh, asterisk. I used flash steps and ran across the road while grabbing him quickly. The civilians had no way of seeing my movements as they thought it was a sudden gust of wind. I carried him to the other side of the road, which was a thick forest. What? Way to AR dash I quickly hit his nerve points and he went to sleep. Then I stripped him of his clothes and wore them for myself. I also put on the traditional Tibetan hat that he had to hide my face. Okay, this will do, I said, and left him in the shade to sleep for a day or two. BTU, I left him a few coins by the side to make up for his inconvenience. And then I went into the city of Tibet, unnoticed. The first code of war. Know your enemies. Chapter 98, the city of Shigetse. Tai Lung's POV. Fishing information about the city from the traveling merchants and traders I walked with, I came to learn that the city was Shigetse City, the second largest city of Tibet, which was also a great trading city and a military superpower due to being located near the borders. The morning sun was already high in the sky as it cast a golden hue on the city of Shigetse. As I got closer and closer to the city, the first thing I noticed was the giant castle located in an elevated hill right at the center of the city. The Tashil Hunpo Monastery was the name of the great construction. It was a sprawling complex with golden rooftops that dominated the skyline. Its majestic presence seemed to anchor the city to the heavens. The monastery's walls, built from stone and wood, stood firm and their red and white surfaces glow softly under the morning sun. As I reached the city gate, I marveled at the giant walls that were treated around the city and the natural rocky hills which seemed to cradle the entire city. The walls had beautiful engravings in it. The guards who stood guard at the gate also seemed to be quite competent, observing their muscle structure and their chi. I could tell that they were warriors who had seen their fair share of battle. There were 3 different entrances to the city. One of them was for the well-known traders who had an identification plate or scroll with them. Then there was a gate in the middle which looked more luxurious than the others. It was probably meant for nobles or other important figures. I went to the last gate, which was also the most busy gate. It was for visitors who came to the city for the first time or peasants who came to buy things for the village. Getting into the city was an easy process as they simply took my name, Lin Fan, and I had to give a small coin to enter the city. I was the ruler and supreme general of unified China, so I did not lack the money. And to my convenience, Tibet and China shared the same currency. As I entered the city and ventured deeper, I was greeted with a labyrinth of narrow winding streets. The houses were built from stone, wood, and sun-dried mud bricks, and they stood shoulder to shoulder, creating a sense of order in the busy streets. There were many carvings on the walls of the buildings and prayer flags of different colors fluttered in the wind. These flags seemed to be the main decoration of the Tibets. I pulled down my hat as I continued walking through the streets. Merchants and artisans filled the street and they set up all stalls at the side of the road. They sold textiles, handicrafts, jewelry, spices, and carpets, and I even saw some goods from China. The houses were mostly 3 to 4 stories high and they had flat roofs on which the people could dry their crops and hang their clothes. The houses had small windows from which I could peer into the cozy interior of each house. Although it was not as grand as the great cities of China like Gangnam City or Milan City, the Tibetans were not any worse in their wealth and living conditions, it seems. I might even go as far as saying I liked the city quite a bit just because of its low population and lack of fireworks. My acute hearing and sense of smell guided me as I walked towards the bustling market of the city. When I reached the market square, I noticed the myriad of trade in the city and the many establishments there. My eyes lingered on the elder people who were chatting and the children who were running around with joyous laughter. The atmosphere was harmonious and joyous. It made me wonder why the Tites wanted to invade China in the first place. They looked so happy here. Then I realized that it was not the people, but the leaders in charge who were willing to destroy this peace for the sake of more power and land. It affirmed in my mind how the civilians were not involved in wars and that I should always make sure to not hurt incoherence when I can. At one corner of the market, there was a big stall which I assumed was where news or orders were given out throughout the city. There was a sober mood in that part of the market which was understandable, considering I wiped out thousands of their soldiers only a few days ago. In fact, it was surprising that his city was this loud and joyous after such a tragic event. Was the empire suppressing the news? Maybe, but I didn't bother lingering on that line of thought. I just didn't care. Then just as I was about to walk and take a step towards another part of the market square, an attractive smell caught my nose, and the city saved itself. Fish. I turned around and immediately walked towards the smell of that wonderful dish. I saw a stall which was selling fish and the sign said they were fish from Yamdrok Lake. I did not pay attention to the raw fish which was for sale. Instead, I was more focused on the restaurant which had many fish dishes on their menu. I haven't eaten in 5 days, so I immediately walked into the restaurant. Third POV. Hey, you, what are you doing there? The commander of the military force in Shigatse City called out the leopard who was sleeping naked in the forest beside the main road. A dozen soldiers followed behind the commander as they investigated the scene of a naked leopard sleeping alone in the forest. It was a scene they had not seen before. The commander and his soldiers were just returning from the previous location of the Tibetan army, which was wiped out by Tai Lung. They went there to investigate and to see if the rumors were really true. And on their way back to the city, they saw the leopard which Tai Lung robbed. He is not waking up, one soldier said as he tried to wake up the leopard by shaking him a couple of times. Wait, let me see. The commander said. He crouched before the leopard to examine. The commander with his years of experience was able to find out what happened after only a few seconds. A nerve attack, he said in a grave tone. Nerve attacks were the pinnacle of kung fu, so it means that such a figure was around the city. It made him extremely wary. Not only that, he also saw the pouch of coins beside the leopard who had nothing but his underwear. It was an odd scene that tells him something more than just robbing happened. Let's see here, the commander said and hit a nerve of the leopard. At first it did not, but after a few tries, the unconscious leopard jolted awake. What? Who are you? The leopard screamed, but before he could struggle and go on a mindless attack, the commander immobilized him. Calm down now, you are safe. The leopard took a moment to get his bearing. He looked around at the sliders and heaved in a deep breath. I thought, what happened here? The commander asked as he slowly let go of the leopard. The leopard seemed to be deep in thought, or maybe stuck in a memory of what happened before he passed out. His eyes glazed over before they refocused back on the commander. Why did he attack me? Who attacked you? The commander asked. He had an inkling on who it was from the moment he realized the leopard suffered from nerve attacks. It reminded him of a snow leopard who he had to fight against 20 or so years ago. He was a specialist in nerve attacks and utilized it to the limit as he stopped the Titan invasion by himself. Tell him who attacked you. The leopard stayed silent, making sure it was not a dream, confirming in his mind that what happened was not a dream but a reality, because it was strange. Why would such a figure attack him? Tai Lung, he said, and the commander held his breath as his PTSD acted up. Chapter 99, Project Godfall. Tai Lung's POV. Not bad at all, I said in satisfaction as I devoured the fish dishes served in front of me. The restaurant was not as busy as it looked from the outside, and other than the fact that I had to wait a long time for the food to arrive, I had no complaints. Shigatse was a nice city, and of course, I say this not only because of the nice fish dishes. I took my sweet time to enjoy the fish. My ears were in constant surveillance as I listened in on the conversation of the customers around me. Rumors, news, thoughts, opinions, everything could be useful, so while I was enjoying food, I was also working. The sun was way past its peak as afternoon rolled around. I would have said that my time in Shigatse City was amazing if not for the multiple undercover guards who came in right after. They were silent, but not out of ignorance. Their silence tells me of their awareness, their possession of knowledge they should not know. Their eyes were on me. They knew who I am, but they didn't make a move. Instead, they were being careful to not be noticed. They only observed from a distance. Interesting, I muttered as I spared a part of my mind to observe them. To be completely honest, I knew that I would be found out eventually. My only disguise was dressing in a Titan dress and wearing a hat, and not only that, the person I got my disguise from was still sleeping on the side of the road. He could be discovered anytime, or he would wake up and notify the officials of what happened to him soon. Although I went into the city undercover, my intention was never to stay undercover. Why? Because I didn't need to. Because I was strong. Even if they knew who I was, even if they knew that their main enemy, the person who wiped out their fellow soldiers in one night, was in their city, what can they do? Are they going to attack me? Are they going to try and capture me? Fight me in their own city? Absolute stupidity. I was already at the level of strength where I could raise a city to the ground alone. I have done it twice before, and for the third time, I will do it better and easier. If they knew anything about me and what I did a few days ago, they should be aware of this fact too. They would never sacrifice an important city such as Shigatse and the lives of all the civilians just because of the low possibility of killing me. I was like a mosquito who landed on their balls. They can't just hit me while I am there. And even if they did, not only could I defeat them, but I could also fly away in case of trickery or other forms of unforeseen circumstances. Like if they try and keep me in the city while they invade China, I would just fly to the borders. They couldn't trap me, so I didn't really have an issue with being revealed. That was why I was never careful in the first place. The only thing noteworthy was the fact that they found me this quickly. Color me impressed, the guards and the soldiers were seriously good at their jobs. The guards who had come to the restaurant did not approach me, and after a while, most of them left with only two of them staying behind to continue spying on me. I ignored them and continued on my exploration of Shigatse after I was done eating. There was much to explore and a new culture to experience as I roamed around the city, trying out different street foods and buying some things here and there. I had a constant surveillance on me from henceforth, but I did not mind. They were like the air, present but without the ability to do anything to me. After the day was over, I went to one of the best inns in the city and I decided to spend the night there. My job was to guard China from the invasion while it was in the middle of unification. During my time spent in the city, I realized that Shigatse was the most important military city of Tibet. Suffice it to say that no invasion would happen without getting the city involved. so I thought I might be spending more time in this city than I thought. I didn't mind, it was fun. I sat cross-legged on top of my bed and while maintaining awareness, I let my body rest and meditate. Third POV. Do not engage. The commander of the city of Shigetse, a giant bull, said to his antelope and deer soldiers. Do I make myself clear? You must absolutely not do anything to provoke him. Even if he kills someone, or steals anything, you shall do nothing. The commander looked them in the eye with utmost seriousness. Your only job is to observe him and report back to me every 30 minutes and to make him aware that we are watching him. Hopefully, knowing that we are watching might restrain him a bit from doing something truly horrible. Or he could just not give a fuck and do anything he wants. I want to know everything. From what he bought to where he went. How many times does he pee? Did he yawn? How many times? I want absolutely everything. This is an important task which should be handled with utmost care. The fate of the city literally depends on it. The commander said and sent some of his soldiers away. Now go. The commander slumped back down on his chair after the soldiers left. He rubbed his temple and contemplated carefully on what he was going to do next. He was currently in the barracks of the Shikatse army, which was located near the heart of the city where they could easily access every part of the city. He waited a few seconds and allowed himself to get a moment of respite. Then he eventually took out a pen and paper to write a report. A report that would be sent to the emperor directly. His main priority as the commander of the city was to protect the people, and that duty prevents him from doing anything towards Tai Lung. He did not know what action to take, so he sent a report to the emperor, notifying him and waiting for orders from a higher authority. The capital city of Tibet, Lhasa, was approximately 300 kilometers away from Shigetse city, so it took some time to communicate with each other. But in such an emergency case, the commander ordered their fastest solider to deliver the message instead of a normal bird messenger. Baimeng was a great snipe and one of the most promising soldiers of the city. Not only that, he could fly at great speed, so he was given the mission of delivering the report. Baimeng would take around 3 hours to go from Shigetse to Lhasa. The commander did not receive a reply for the rest of the day. The emperor and his people were likely discussing what they should do. He expected that. But what he didn't expect was a scroll of orders to come back as soon as the next day. The scroll said that the emperor and the officials were aware of the sensitivity of the situation and for the soldiers to remain passive, and that the emperor had directly sent someone to Shigetse city to deal with Tai Lung in the meantime. But that was not where the scroll ends. Remarkable, the commander said as his body trembled due to pure excitement. At this moment, he could not help but admire the emperor for devising such splendid plans in such a short amount of time. What was the plan exactly? The details were unknown, but on the scroll sent by the emperor, the name of the plan read, Project Godfall. Tibet realized that to invade China, they would have to rid of their greatest obstacle first. Chaos was brewing in the city of Shigetse, one that would dictate the fate of Tibet itself. Was Tai Lung too arrogant for his own good? Or were the Tibetans aiming too high in their effort to slay a figure such as Tai Lung? The world awaits for an answer. Chapter 100, The Emperor of Tibet. Third POV. The Emperor of Tibet. Songtsen Gampo, son of Emperor Songtsen Namri. That was the name of the ruler of the Tibetan Empire. He was famously known for his keen intellect since he was young, and he was the only emperor in the Tibetan history whose reign was absolute without the nobles or major clans sharing any influence. His words were the law of the land. His voice was a supreme command. His belief was the empire's belief. His goal was the goal of the empire. He was crowned with the title, which roughly translated to the personification of Tibet. Even amongst all of the previous emperors of Tibet, he was remarkable and would definitely go down in history just because of the achievements he had made in his 50 long years of living, unifying the many tribes and clans of Tibet, claiming absolute sovereignty of the empire, introducing reforms in agriculture, his victories against impossible odds in battle, and many more. These were just some of his achievements. But even such an exceptional ruler was having a headache when it came to the Supreme General of China, Tai Lung. He was here, in the second largest city of Tibet. A question rampaged in the mind of the emperor moment he got the report. Why? Why was he here? Was he going to attack and destroy the city like he did back in China? Was he going undercover to get more information? Or was he sending a message again? Something like, make a move against China if you want the city gone. I dare you? It was the greatest strategic move you can make against someone who is trying to invade your empire. A strategy the emperor of Tibet never saw coming. Everything happened so fast. A few days ago Tai Lung was sighted on the borders of China, wiping out a small portion of the Tiantan army, but even before he fully dealt with the aftermath, he got news like this. He felt a massive headache coming. He should have put the cities in a lockdown. He should have stationed more soldiers in the city of Shigetse. He should have. So many things he should have done. But none he did, because he had never faced an enemy like Tai Lung before. Sure, he had to go up against Tai Lung 20 years ago in their last invasion of China, but during that time, Tai Lung was still mortal. He still had limitations. The only reason Tai Lung was able to repel the invasion was because he used the terrain as an advantage and employed multiple ploys and battle tactics to distract them. And it was also because that invasion was merely a test by the emperor, to collect information for latter wars. So Tai Lung back then was strong but was still at believable strength. But now, that mortal warrior had gone up in power and he could only describe as godly. As the emperor, he was in direct contact with the spies in China, and the stories he got from his spies were something that made him nervous even a country away. To deal with 100,000 soldiers was something the emperor would be able to accomplish with ease. But to deal with a person with the strength of 100,000 soldiers was something he hadn't even considered. It was like a game of chess, where even if you can deal with 2 bishops, 2 rooks and the pawns, you need a different set of skills and a different realm of insight to deal with 1 queen. What should I do? He muttered to himself in the silence of his room. He had not notified anyone else of the report as he found no need to. His advisors and his ministers would only lead him in the wrong direction. Those arrogant cunts would never be able to wrap around their head how one person can be so superior. They would probably demand the army of Shigatsa to capture Tai Lung. Easy. The emperor need no such stupidity at the moment. What he needed was a time for himself, so that he might devise a plan he could use against Tai Lung. He must come up with a plan. At this point, many people in his situation would wonder why he must fight back. Why does Tibet need to take over China so desperately? Why fight at all, against a seemingly impossible enemy? Was it greed? Was it pride? No, such sins could never push a soul as far as the emperor was willing to go. It was for the empire, the only thing Songtsen Gampo considered to be bigger than himself. He was doing everything for the empire. Tibet was situated in the middle of 2 powerhouses, China and India. These 2 countries and the empires within them could take over Tibet in a heartbeat. The only reason Tibet had existed for thousands of years was that China was obsessed with itself and being fragmented into different kingdoms, and India had no interest in meddling with other countries. In short, it was because of them. Tibet had existed for this long only because these 2 counties had no interest in it. Tibet did not even have power over her own fate. It was due to luck which had spanned over 1,000 years, that Tibet still even exists. But for how long? How long would Tibet survive? Not for long, he reckoned. With the unification of China and with Samudragupta's growing ambition, if Tibet did not fall during his lifetime, it will in the next generation. It will be the end of the empire, the time they run out of their luck. He could already envision the future. A dark future for the empire where it was robbed of its identity and was forced to become a part of either country. Where their individuality, their independence, and their culture were stolen away because they were not strong enough to preserve it. A time when Tibet was no longer an empire but a mere part of a bigger empire. A time when even their own history becomes a mere part of a grander history. Their people, no longer being called Tibetans. For such empire would no longer exist. For the future of the empire, Tibet could either fight and win or fall and get swallowed by the strong. He shall do it. Only he could do it. If he failed, there would be no more chances. He knew the workings of Qi and how it could expand one's lifespan to live for thousands of years. Tai Lung would only grow stronger as he lived for hundreds of years, and the impossible would become even more impossible. So he must be the one to do it. He must save the empire and secure its future. Tibet needs to become a stronger and bigger empire. But for that, the emperor must face an enemy he considered to be the closest thing to God. He must kill Tai Lung. He could never win in a contest of strength and power. He had no impressive kung fu or was blessed with the power of Qi, but he would use everything the universe had given him. He would devise a plan that could lead him to victory against impossible odds. He will do it. For Tibet.